The lawyer slid a one-page transfer agreement toward Claire and tapped the blank beside purchase price. $1, he said. Claire thought she had misheard him. Across the conference table, her cousin Mallory stopped twisting the clasp of their grandmother's pearl necklace. Dean Mercer, Mallory's father, made a sound that began as a cough and ended as a laugh. The lawyer turned another paper around. Stapled to it was a color photograph of the old farmhouse with a red notice nailed across the front door. Unsafe structure. Occupancy prohibited. $1, Claire repeated. The will grants you the exclusive option to purchase the house and its surveyed parcel from the estate for that amount. You have 30 days to exercise the option. And if I don't? The structure remains with the estate. Dean leaned back, which means I pay somebody to knock it down. Claire looked at the photograph. The porch roof sagged over weeds as tall as the windows. Rain had peeled the white paint into gray curls. It was the last place she remembered being happy with her mother, and Ruth Mercer had left it to her like an insult that required exact change. Why? Not why the house. Why had her grandmother wanted Claire to stand here and choose? The law office smelled like burnt coffee, and the lemon furniture polish used in churches. Claire kept her hands beneath the table so no one would see the flour caught in the cracks around her fingernails. She had come directly from the bakery in her one good blouse, changing in the grocery store restroom while Denise covered the cinnamon rolls. Mallory had come dressed for an inheritance. She wore a cream-colored suit, soft leather shoes, and Ruth's pearls, which she had apparently been allowed to collect before the estate meeting. Mallory had always possessed the strange ability to look appropriately grieved and freshly moisturized at the same time. The lawyer, Raymond Pike, continued reading. He had a narrow face and the careful voice of a man accustomed to families discovering that dead people could still start fights. To Dean Mercer, the eastern residence, equipment barn, and all agricultural land, except the parcel described in Appendix C. Dean nodded once, though everyone in the room already knew he had spent the past month talking about what he would do with the acreage. To Mallory Mercer, the remaining personal property, household contents as inventoried, jewelry, and the residual financial accounts after expenses. Mallory lowered her eyes modestly. The pearls moved against her throat. Claire looked again at the photograph in front of her. "Does the house have electricity?" Dean laughed outright this time. "Technically," Mr. Pike asked. "That's usually my favorite kind of electricity." His mouth almost moved. The service was disconnected after the county inspection. "Water? There is a well." Dean folded his arms. "There is a hole in the ground with a pipe sticking out of it. Don't oversell." Mr. Pike adjusted his glasses. "The pump has not been tested." "Taxes?" "The parcel taxes are current through the end of the year. Any repairs, inspections, utility restoration, or demolition costs after transfer would be yours." Claire scanned the condemnation order. The list ran down half a page. Roof failure, compromised porch, exposed wiring, water intrusion, possible foundation displacement. At the bottom, a deadline had been underlined. 120 days from the date of transfer to demonstrate substantial stabilization. Subject to county approval, she had $37 in her checking account until Friday. Mallory reached over and touched the edge of the paper with one pale fingernail. Grandma must have thought she was helping. Did she? The question came out sharper than Claire intended. Mallory withdrew her hand. "I only mean she knew you didn't have a place of your own." Dean stared at the ceiling. Claire felt heat climb her neck. She had told Ruth that 2 years ago, during one of their stiff Christmas phone calls. Claire had been between apartments then, sleeping on Denise's couch while pretending the arrangement was temporary. Ruth had said, "You should come see me when you get settled." Claire had almost laughed. "You first," she had wanted to say. Now she occupied Denise's spare room, where the dresser contained 3 broken lamp bases and a drawer full of expired coupons. Denise never complained directly. Instead, she asked things like, "Do you think you'll need both shelves in the bathroom much longer?" in the same gentle voice she used to warn customers that the rotisserie chicken had bones. Mr. Pike pushed a small envelope toward Claire. "The house key." Dean glanced at it. "That key hasn't worked since Reagan was president. It worked when the property was inventoried." "You went inside?" Mallory asked, briefly. Her concern sounded genuine. That was the trouble with Mallory. She could be cruel without lying, and kind without changing anything. "Was it awful?" she asked. Mr. Pike considered the professional limits of the question. I would recommend closed shoes. Dean rubbed a hand over his face. He was 60, broad through the shoulders, with a deep tan that stopped at his watch. He had farmed Ruth's land for years, under arrangements nobody had ever clearly explained to Claire. Elaine used to call him the Crown Prince of Hay, usually after 2 glasses of wine. Look, he said, turning to Claire. Before you get ideas, that house is done. I told Mom that for years. Roof's bad, sills worse. Raccoons have probably established local government. There's no shame in letting it go. There seems to be some shame in giving it to me. Claire, Mallory murmured. No, I'm trying to understand the theme. Dean's jaw tightened, but his voice softened. Your grandmother felt guilty about Elaine. There it was, her mother's name laid on the table like a wet coat. Mr. Pike lowered his gaze to the will. Claire studied Dean's face. Did she tell you that? She didn't have to. Then, maybe don't translate. Dean's chair scraped back an inch. Mallory put 2 fingers against his sleeve, and to Claire's surprise, he stopped. The estate meeting continued through accounts, farm equipment, and a collection of silver serving pieces Claire had never seen used. She learned that Ruth owned 12 pie plates and that none of them belonged to Claire. She learned that the newer ranch house had central air, a generator, and an appraised value that made Dean clear his throat. She learned that after medical bills and estate costs, Mallory would receive enough money to replace Claire's yearly bakery wages several times over. She also learned that grief could sit quietly in a room while everybody discussed extension cords. When Mr. Pike finished, Mallory signed where she was told. Dean signed twice. Claire left her line blank. Outside, July heat struck like an opened oven. The courthouse square shimmered beyond the parking lot. Claire stood beside her Honda, pressing the envelope with the key against her palm. Mallory followed her out. You know Dad doesn't mean half of what he says. He means it. He just prefers when people don't repeat it. A breeze lifted Mallory's blonde hair without cooling anything. Up close, concealer had gathered in a fine crease beneath her left eye. She looked tired. Claire disliked noticing. I could give you some money, Mallory said. Claire looked at her. For the option, the dollar, I mean. I can swing the dollar. I wasn't making fun of you. Then what were you doing? Mallory glanced toward the courthouse doors, trying not to have another family scene in public. We're in a law office reading Grandma's will. That is a family scene in its natural habitat. A reluctant smile touched Mallory's mouth and vanished. I'm sorry about the house. Claire wanted to ask whether Mallory was sorry enough to trade. The question would have been childish, and worse, Claire already knew the answer. Are those hers? She asked instead. Mallory's hand went to the pearls. Dad gave them to me this morning. They're listed for me. I know. I was in the room. I wore them because she always wore them to important things. Ruth had worn them to Elaine's funeral too. Claire remembered that suddenly. The pearls above a black dress, Ruth's lips pressed so firmly together they had nearly disappeared. She had stood beside the casket for 9 minutes, touched nothing, and left before Claire could decide whether to hug her. Looks right on you, Claire said. It was not a compliment, but Mallory received it like one. Dean came through the doors, carrying a thick folder beneath his arm. Claire, hold up. She opened her car door. I'm serious about helping you out. He stopped a few feet away, perhaps sensing that closer would be unwise. I'll give you $500 for the option. You sign it over, I handle the demolition, nobody gets hurt. $500. That's $500 more than you walked in with. Mallory closed her eyes. Dean realized what he had said. You know what I mean. Claire did. That was the problem. Her Honda took 3 attempts to start. Dean remained in the parking lot as she pulled away, one hand raised against the sun, as if he could not understand why she had made him look like a man who had offered his niece $500 for her dead grandmother's apology. The Mercer farm lay 40 minutes south of town, beyond a stretch of highway where limestone shoulders gave way to cedar and oak. Claire had not driven that road since Ruth's funeral 18 months earlier. Even then, she had gone only as far as the church. She passed the faded feed store, a shuttered gas station, and the Baptist church whose sign announced, God answers. Email. Elaine used to honk every time they passed it. Ruth hated that. At the turnoff, the mailbox still said Mercer in black stick-on letters. Claire slowed. The newer ranch house sat back on a rise, pale brick and dark shutters, with Dean's truck already parked outside. He had beaten her there by taking the state road. Farther east, round hay bales dotted the fields in obedient rows. The old farmhouse stood at the opposite end of the lane, where the road narrowed between walnut trees. It appeared gradually, one ruined section at a time. The chimney, the tilted roofline, the front porch bent low in the middle like an exhausted back. Claire parked beneath a sycamore and sat with the engine running. The house was smaller than memory and worse than the photograph. Kudzu climbed one porch column. A sheet of blue tarp flapped from the roof, faded almost white. One upstairs window had been covered with plywood, and the front steps leaned away from each other as if they had quarreled. She switched off the car. Cicadas screamed from the trees. Somewhere beyond the field, a tractor shifted gears. Claire took the envelope, found an old pair of sneakers in her trunk, and changed out of her bakery shoes. The porch groaned beneath her weight. She stepped around the collapsed section and fitted the key into the lock. It worked. The door opened 3 inches before catching on warped floorboards. Claire put her shoulder against it and pushed until damp, stale air rolled over her. The front room held a broken lamp, a dead fern, and curtains gray with mildew. Water stains spread across the ceiling. Ruth's furniture was gone, claimed, inventoried, or thrown away. Pale rectangles on the wallpaper marked where family photographs had hung. Claire moved carefully toward the kitchen. Mouse droppings speckled the counters. A cabinet door had fallen across the sink. The room smelled of wet wood, old grease, and something sweetly rotten. She nearly turned back. Then she saw the pantry. The narrow door still wore 7 pencil marks along its frame. Elaine at 16. Dean at 19, added as a joke. Mallory at 12. Claire stepped closer, brushing cobwebs from the wood. Near the bottom was her own name. Claire, 11, stubborn as August heat. She touched the faded letters with one finger. A truck slowed on the road outside. Claire heard it stop, idle, then move on. She stood in the ruined kitchen until the light shifted across the floor. Ruth had remembered that summer. She had remembered Claire standing barefoot against this frame, complaining that the pencil tickled her scalp. She had remembered, and still they had lost 17 years to pride, silence, and whatever adults called fear when they wanted it to sound respectable. Claire took the unsigned transfer papers from her bag and laid them on the counter. Then she reached into her wallet and set a crumpled dollar beside them. A mouse darted from beneath the stove and disappeared through a hole beside the baseboard. Claire snatched the dollar off the counter. "Okay," she told the empty kitchen. "You're not inheriting it." Her voice sounded too loud in the house. Something answered inside the wall with a soft, papery scratching. She folded the transfer papers and returned them to her bag, then used her phone to photograph the pantry marks. The screen brightened the wood, making Ruth's handwriting look newer than it was. Claire took a second picture without knowing why. When she stepped backward, her heel sank through the linoleum with a wet crunch. She froze. The floor held, though it gave under her weight like a mattress. She shifted toward the doorway and tested each step before committing to it. The dining room was drier, protected by the remains of the porch roof. Rust-colored wallpaper peeled behind a black iron radiator. The room had once seemed enormous. Claire could remember crawling under Ruth's table while Elaine and Tessa Green canned tomatoes, their bare feet moving around her like furniture that laughed. The table was gone. She opened a closet and found 3 empty hangers, a jar of cloudy buttons, and a straw hat with the crown crushed in. Ruth had not left Claire the contents. Claire knew that. Still, the emptiness felt curated. Upstairs, the first tread shifted under her shoe, so she did not test the second. She stood at the bottom, looking toward the dim landing. Her mother's old room was up there. "Not today," Claire said. This time the house did not argue. Outside, she walked around the foundation, using the inspection photograph as a guide. The rear wall bowed visibly beneath the kitchen windows. Moss covered several courses of stone. A downspout ended 6 feet above the ground, apparently having resigned from the concept of drainage. She crouched to examine a gap near the corner. "You planning to crawl in there?" The voice behind her made Claire pitch forward and catch herself with both hands. An older man stood beyond the weeds, wearing faded overalls over a white undershirt. His silver hair was flattened on one side, and he carried a wooden cane he did not seem interested in using. "You sneak up on everybody like that?" Claire asked. "Only people inspecting raccoon entrances with their face." She wiped her hands on her pants and stood. "Claire Mercer. I know who you are." There was no warmth in the statement, but no accusation either. The man pointed his cane toward the foundation gap. That's not your worst one. Good. I was afraid I'd found it too quickly. He turned and moved along the rear wall without introducing himself. His right leg dragged slightly, though the cane remained tucked beneath his arm. Claire followed because he behaved like a man who expected landscapes to arrange themselves behind him. At the southwest corner, he pushed aside a curtain of trumpet vine. The sill plate had rotted until the timber resembled dark soil. Above it, the siding sagged. That's your worst one, he said. Claire stared. Can it be fixed? Anything can be fixed if you replace enough of it. That sounds expensive. Usually is. Then why'd you say it like encouragement? He glanced at her. His eyes were a pale, irritated blue. Didn't. From the direction of the road came the rumble of another engine. Dean's truck approached through the trees, raising dust. The older man's mouth tightened. You Calvin Brooks? Claire guessed. He gave her a suspicious look. How'd you know? My mother said you once chased Uncle Dean with a post hole digger. Wasn't running. The machine or Dean? Calvin considered that. Both were moving at a decent pace. Dean parked near Claire's Honda and climbed out. He had removed his jacket and tie, leaving his white dress shirt damp at the collar. Calvin. Dean. Claire looked between them. This is already fun. Dean ignored that. I saw her car and wanted to make sure she didn't go through a floor. Almost did, Claire said. He looked at the house, then at her shoes, checking for injuries without appearing to. You can't stay here. I'm aware of what condemn means. I mean tonight. Or any night. That red paper isn't decoration. Thank you, Dean. Calvin touched his cane to the rotten sill. You knew about this? Of course I knew. How long? Mom wouldn't let anybody open the wall. Wasn't my question. Dean's attention sharpened. You still own that cane because I haven't taken it from you. Calvin finally leaned on it. There. Now it's medically necessary. Claire laughed before she could stop herself. Dean looked offended, then tired. Do not encourage him, he said. Calvin wandered toward the road, apparently satisfied with the visit. Mr. Brooks, Claire called. He kept walking. Can I ask you something? You just did. Can the house make it 4 months? Calvin stopped. His gaze moved from the broken porch to the chimney and up along the roof. For the first time, the performance fell away. Claire saw calculation in his face and something quieter beneath it. House has made it 114 years, he said. Question is whether you can afford to help it make another one. He continued down the lane. Dean waited until Calvin was out of easy hearing. He'll talk you into doing something foolish, then criticize your technique until you wish the roof had fallen on you. You two seem close. He and Mom were close. That gave him opinions. Claire brushed dirt from her palms. Everybody had opinions about Grandma. Nobody seems to have been able to get her gutters fixed. Dean looked toward the bowed kitchen wall. You think we didn't try? I don't know. Did you? She said no. So you left it. You didn't even come. The words landed between them. Dean's face changed instantly. Regret arrived, but not fast enough to erase what had been there first. Claire walked toward her car. Claire. She opened the driver's door. I shouldn't have said that. No, you should have. I was starting to think $500 bought the polite version of you. He came closer but stopped on the other side of the door. Your grandmother could make helping her feel like an accusation. Ask Calvin. Ask anybody. I'm sure that was hard. It was. You still got the good house. Dean flinched. It was slight, nearly hidden by anger. You believe that thing is a message about who she loved more? It isn't. Mom stopped sleeping in the old house 4 years ago because the ceiling came down over her bed. I moved her into the ranch place. I brought her groceries, drove her to appointments, took care of the fields. She complained every day that I'd stolen her life. Claire looked at him across the car door. She was good at keeping score, he continued. Just never showed anybody the rules. For 1 second, they were not uncle and niece standing on opposite sides of an inheritance. They were two people Ruth had managed to disappoint in opposite directions. Then Dean nodded toward Claire's bag. Take the 500. The second passed. Claire got into the car. Good talk. At Denise's house, Claire found a sticky note on the refrigerator asking her not to use the milk because it was for Denise's coffee. Beneath it sat a grocery bag containing a rotisserie chicken, 2 yogurts, and a plastic container labeled Claire. Denise appeared in the kitchen doorway, wearing pink scrubs and one sock. Well, I own the option to buy a dangerous building. That sounds worse than an actual building. It costs $1. Denise opened the refrigerator, noticed the milk still intact, and relaxed. She was 42 and built like someone who could carry a television alone, but would prefer that you ask first. What does a dollar house need? A roof, electricity, a rear wall, possibly an exorcism? Plumbing, unknown, heat? There's a radiator. That is not an answer. No. Denise pulled a fork from the drawer and began eating Claire's chicken directly from the container. Hey, I paid for it. It has my name on it. That's how I remember who needs feeding. Claire sat at the small kitchen table. The chair wobbled. Everything in Denise's house worked, but required a private accommodation. The bathroom door lifted if you wanted it to close. The dryer needed a spoon wedged beneath one foot. The air conditioner ran well unless it was hot. Denise looked at her over the fork. You're thinking about doing it? I haven't signed. You're doing the face. What face? The one where you decide suffering is morally superior to convenience. I don't have that face. You got it from your mother. Claire stared at the fake wood grain on the table. Denise set down the fork. Sorry, don't be. It's still her face. After a moment, Denise sat across from her. Is the house worth anything? Dean offered me $500. That was not my question. Claire pulled out her phone and showed her the photograph of the pantry frame. Denise enlarged it with 2 fingers. Stubborn as August heat. She remembered. Looks like. She remembered that. But when Mom died, she stood beside the coffin like she was waiting for a bus. Denise gave the phone back. People remember easy things when the hard thing would require an apology. Claire hated how neatly the sentence fit. That night, she lay awake in the spare room, listening to the dryer thump around the spoon downstairs. The transfer papers rested on the dresser. At 2 a.m, she got up and read every page again. The house was not a gift. Mr. Pike's language made that plain. It was a choice with a timer attached. At 5, Claire showered, put on her bakery uniform, and drove to work before Denise woke. She glazed 6 dozen donuts, burned the first tray of pecan rolls, and told a customer with complete sincerity that the blueberry muffins were fresh. At 11:15, she called Mr. Pike from beside the loading dock. I want to exercise the option. He paused. Have you obtained an estimate for the required repairs? No. Have you spoken with a contractor? I spoke with Calvin Brooks. That is not exactly the same thing. Have you met Calvin? I have. Then you know it feels legally binding. Mr. Pike exhaled. Claire, my obligation is to carry out the will, not advise you whether this is wise. But I do want to be clear. Once the property transfers, the estate will not be responsible for the structure. I understand. The county deadline begins on the transfer date. I understand. And Dean's offer is still available. Did he ask you to say that? He asked me to make certain you knew. Claire looked through the loading dock doors at stacks of flour waiting to be moved. I know. Mr. Pike scheduled the signing for Friday afternoon. When Claire ended the call, a shadow crossed the concrete. She turned. Her bakery manager, Wanda Ellis, stood in the doorway with her arms folded. Personal calls on break, Wanda said. I'm sorry. You've been sorry 4 times this week. Wanda's eyes dropped to the flower on Claire's sleeve, then returned to her face. She was not unkind. Unkind would have been easier. You need this job? She asked. Yes. Then be here while you're here. Claire put the phone in her pocket. For the rest of the shift, she measured, mixed, rolled, and cleaned. She did not check repair costs. She did not look at the pantry photograph. She did not think about rotten timber or Ruth's handwriting. On Friday, she signed the papers at 4:20. Mr. Pike placed the deed copy in a folder. Claire placed a clean $1 bill on his desk. He looked at it. We can record the consideration without physically collecting, I know. She slid it toward him anyway. An hour later, Claire returned to the farmhouse carrying work gloves, contractor bags, a pry bar, and $34 worth of cleaning supplies. A pair of porch posts lay in the grass beside the front steps. They were weathered but solid, with their nails already pulled. Calvin was nowhere in sight. Claire walked around the porch posts twice before touching them. One was painted a color that might once have been green. The other had been stripped to bare cedar, silvered by weather. They did not match each other, or anything on the house. She looked toward the road. Thank you, she called. A mourning dove answered from the walnut tree with a sound like somebody regretting a purchase. Claire carried her supplies inside and opened every window she could force. Two refused. One moved so suddenly the upper sash dropped and shattered a pane. She stood with both hands still raised, listening to glass patter onto the floor. Excellent start. She swept the front room first. Dust rose in thick columns, glittering in the sunlight. Beneath it, she found acorns, brittle leaves, a petrified wasp nest, and enough mouse droppings to suggest several generations had enjoyed peaceful retirement there. The dead fern went into a contractor bag. The broken lamp followed. She hesitated over the crushed straw hat, then placed it on the mantel. By dusk, she had cleared a path from the front door to the kitchen and filled 6 bags. Her shoulders ached. Sweat had soaked through the waistband of her jeans. The house looked exactly as ruined as before, only with cleaner ruin. She dragged the last bag toward the porch and heard wood crack beneath her. A hand caught the back of her shirt. Claire swung around with the pry bar raised. Calvin released her and stepped out of range. Good instincts, poor balance. She looked down. One of the porch boards had split beneath her left foot. Through the gap, she could see darkness and weeds. "Do you ever say hello?" "Not if I have something useful to say." He had changed into a blue work shirt and carried a paper grocery sack. A folding carpenter's square protruded from his back pocket. Claire lowered the pry bar. "Did you leave the posts?" "No." "Who did?" "Porch Ferry." The Porch Ferry owns a truck with a Brooks Hardware sticker shadow on the door. Business closed 11 years ago. Could be anybody's shadow. He took the contractor bag from her and set it aside, then pressed the broken board with his boot. "This section comes out before you carry anything else across it. I'm trying to clean the inside. Porch is how you reach the inside. There's a back door. Kitchen floor's soft. You have a positive thing to say about any entrance? Chimney looks sturdy. I'll use that." Calvin stepped off the porch and began examining the donated posts as if seeing them for the first time. He turned the cedar one with his boot. Might hold a roof. Might? Won't know till the weight's on it. That sounds like a sentence people say right before appearing in an insurance commercial. He opened the grocery sack. Inside were a tape measure, a chalk line, several heavy bolts, and 2 sandwiches wrapped in wax paper. "Eat," he said. "Did the Porch Ferry make sandwiches?" "My sister." "Does your sister know you're giving them away?" "One's mine." Claire selected the sandwich with less mayonnaise leaking through the wrapper. Calvin unfolded the carpenter's square. "We braced the porch roof before removing the rotten boards." "We? You got somebody else coming?" "No." "Then it appears I misspoke." He showed her where to position the temporary supports and made her repeat the process before he allowed her to lift anything. Calvin did not perform the work for her. He stood close enough to stop a mistake and far enough to make clear it would be hers. When Claire set a jack beneath the porch beam, he shook his head. "What? Too far out." "You said under the beam. Gravity has preferences. So does language." He moved the jack 3 inches. For the next hour they raised the sagging section a fraction at a time. The house complained with long creaks. Dust sifted from the porch ceiling. Claire's arms trembled as she slid a brace into place. "Stop," Calvin said. "I have it. That's why I said stop." She froze. He crouched beside the jack and pointed to the base, which had begun to tilt in the soft earth. Claire eased the pressure off. "I saw that. You saw it after I spoke. I was about to see it. That's a common last thought." They reset the jack on a broad plank. When the brace finally held, Calvin struck it twice with a hammer and nodded. The nod pleased Claire more than it should have. A woman appeared on the lane, carrying a red insulated bag. She was small and straight-backed, with cropped gray hair and sunglasses large enough for a celebrity avoiding prosecution. "You fed her one of those awful sandwiches, didn't you?" she asked Calvin. "Turkey. Turkey needs moisture." It had mayonnaise. It had a rumor about mayonnaise. She came up the steps without hesitation and held out one hand. Marlene Brooks, his more socially advanced sister. Claire shook it. "Claire." "I know. You have Elaine's eyebrows." Calvin gathered the tools. Marlene removed a covered glass dish from the bag. "Chicken and dumplings. The dish comes back." "I don't have a refrigerator here. You don't have anything here." "Marlene," Calvin warned. That wasn't judgment. It was inventory. She looked through the front door, her expression changing as she took in the bare room. "Lord, Ruth would skin Dean if she saw what they left." The contents went to Mallory, Claire said. I know what the paper said. I also know Ruth's blue armchair wasn't born in Mallory's storage unit. Calvin picked up the jack. Not our affair. Everything was Ruth's affair when we were in trouble. And that is how she ended up in everybody's business. Marlene turned back to Claire. Do you have somewhere decent to sleep? Yes. It came too quickly. Both Brooks siblings noticed. Claire added, My coworker has a spare room. Good. Because if Calvin catches you sleeping in here, he'll lecture you until the roof collapses voluntarily. I don't lecture. You've been lecturing since Truman. Calvin headed down the steps. Marlene smiled at Claire. He liked your mother. Calvin stopped. Marlene pretended not to see. Claire looked at him. Did you? No, he said. She was loud and borrowed tools without returning them. That sounds like her. She returned the important ones. He walked toward the lane with the jack over one shoulder. Marlene watched him go. That means yes. Across the road, a woman stood beside a mailbox with a bundle of envelopes in one hand. She wore work pants and a wide straw hat. Even at a distance, Claire recognized Tessa Green from old photographs and the funeral. Tessa looked toward the farmhouse, saw Claire watching, and turned away. Marlene's mouth flattened. She still owns the orchard? Claire asked. Every stubborn acre? Does she always stare at people before ignoring them? Only when she cares. I'm relieved. She and Elaine were. I know what they were. Marlene studied her, then zipped the insulated bag shut. All right. The absence of pity in those two words made Claire like her. After they left, Claire sat on the porch edge and ate chicken and dumplings from the dish with a plastic spoon. They were peppery, rich, and still hot in the middle. The field beyond the walnut trees had turned gold in the lowering sun. From the newer house came the distant whine of equipment. For a few minutes, the farmhouse did not feel abandoned. It felt paused. Then Dean's truck came up the lane. He parked close enough to send dust over Claire's dinner. She covered the dish with one hand. You could slow down. I was going 15. Then your truck is dramatic. Dean got out carrying several orange survey flags. He had traded the white shirt for a gray t-shirt, and his forearms were streaked with grease. I heard Calvin was here. Does everybody report to you? No, everybody reports on everybody. That's the neighborhood's principal crop. He planted one flag near the walnut tree, walked 20 paces, then planted another. What are those? Parcel boundary. Claire set down the dish. I have a survey in the folder. You have a drawing? These show you where it is. He placed a third flag along the side yard. The line left Claire the house, a narrow strip toward the road, and less open ground than she had imagined. The old clothesline is on your side, Dean said. The equipment track isn't. Neither is the spring house. I didn't ask for a spring house. I'm avoiding confusion later. Very thoughtful. Dean wiped his forehead with his sleeve. He looked at the braced porch and the salvage posts. Calvin shouldn't be doing heavy work. He mostly criticized. That is heavy work for him. He caught me before I went through a board. Dean's irritation vanished. You all right? I'm fine. He climbed the first step, tested it, and immediately stepped back. You need to block this off. I need to use it. You need a temporary walkway. Would you like to donate one? I offered you $500. That wouldn't buy a walkway. It would buy you a motel room somewhere without raccoons. Claire stood and covered Marlene's dish. Was there anything else? Dean stared at the orange flags instead of her. I talked to a contractor I use for the barns. He can look at the roof next week. For free? He'll look for free. And after looking, he'll tell you it's bad. I got that service from Calvin already. Claire, there's a difference between fixing a porch and taking responsibility for a structure. If somebody gets hurt here, it's on you now. The words made the deed folder in her car feel heavier. Dean lowered his voice. Mom refused to let me tear that place down. Even after the ceiling fell, even after the county got involved. She said it wasn't mine to decide. Maybe it wasn't. No. Apparently it was yours. He gave the farmhouse a long, unreadable look. What? Claire asked. I'm trying to decide whether she thought you'd save it or whether she knew you'd be the one person stubborn enough to hurt yourself trying. Claire thought of the pantry frame. Maybe she didn't know the difference. Dean looked at her then, and something in his face suggested she had answered more than he wanted. He left the flags and drove away. Claire worked until the rooms blurred in the evening light. She removed loose glass from the broken window, taped cardboard over the opening, and carried the remaining bags across Calvin's brace section, one at a time. When she finally locked the front door, the porch posts lay in the grass like a promise made by somebody unwilling to admit it. Her car clicked when she turned the key. Nothing else happened. She tried again. The dashboard lights dimmed. The engine gave one slow, hopeless turn. Come on. Another click. The sun had dropped behind the trees. Claire checked her phone. 9% battery. No signal beside the house. She walked toward the road, holding the phone overhead until one bar appeared. Denise was working late and did not answer. Claire scrolled past Dean's number. A truck approached before she could decide whom else to call. It was older than Dean's, dark green with a dented front fender. It slowed beside her. The driver's window came down. Tessa Green sat behind the wheel. Up close, she had a narrow face, sun-browned skin, and dark hair threaded with gray. A wooden crate of bruised peaches rested on the passenger seat. Claire lowered her phone. I'm fine. I didn't ask. My car won't start. I can see that. Tessa looked beyond her toward the farmhouse. The new brace cast a crooked shadow beneath the porch roof. Calvin, helping you? He denies it. He would. For a moment, Claire thought Tessa might offer a ride. Instead, the woman reached across the peaches, pushed open the passenger door, and moved the crate onto the floor. I'm going as far as the highway, she said. That doesn't get me home. No. It was the first full sentence Tessa had spoken to her, and somehow it contained 17 years of objection. Claire climbed in anyway. The truck cab smelled of peaches, motor oil, and the mint gum Tessa chewed without enthusiasm. A crack ran across the windshield at eye level. Tessa drove with both hands at 10 and 2, upright as if someone were grating her. Claire balanced the crate between her feet. Every peach bore a bruise or split. You sell these? She asked, not looking like that. What happens to them? Jam if I get to them tonight. Compost if I don't. The truck bounced over a rut. 2 peaches rolled against Claire's shoe. I can help, she said. Tessa's hands tightened on the wheel. Why? For the ride. You don't owe me for the ride. You're taking me 5 miles. 4.5. So, it's a smaller debt. Tessa glanced at her, then returned her attention to the lane. You sound like Ruth. People keep saying I look like my mother and sound like my grandmother. It's a wonder I have any original features. They both had a way of turning kindness into accounting. Claire looked out the window. Rows of peach trees spread across the slope to their right, each one casting a long comb of shadow through the grass. You could have kept driving, she said. I considered it. Why didn't you? Tessa shifted gears. Your car was blocking the best place to turn around. The Mercer mailbox passed behind them. Tessa did not ask about the house. Claire waited, then resented her for not asking. At the highway, instead of pulling onto the shoulder, Tessa crossed to a low cinderblock garage with 2 open bays. Ortega Automotive had been painted over the doors in blue. The final E tilted downhill. A man in oil-darkened coveralls was lowering a pickup from a hydraulic lift. He looked over as Tessa parked. Luis, she called through the window. You open? He checked the clock above the office door. For you? No, for her. Luis Ortega came out wiping his hands on a rag. He was compact and broad, with a neatly trimmed beard and safety glasses resting on top of his head. When Claire stepped from the truck, his eyes moved from her to Tessa and back. You found one, he said. Roadside Mercer, Tessa replied. Those are harder to get rid of. Claire lifted the peach crate out. Do people around here practice being welcoming, or does it come naturally? Luis smiled. You're Elaine's daughter, so I've been accused. His smile changed without disappearing. I'm sorry about her. Thank you. Tessa took the crate from Claire before she could offer again. Her Honda's dead at the old house. Year? 2007, Claire said. What did it do? Clicked. That is a car's way of saying something is wrong. I came to the right place. Luis looked at Tessa. You leaving her? I said I'd take her to the highway. This is the highway. Tessa shifted the crate against her hip. Calvin was helping with the porch. Luis gave a low whistle. House must be worse than it looks. You could ask me, Claire said. Both of them looked at her. She lifted her hands. I'm standing here. Luis nodded. How bad is the house? Worse than it looks. Fair enough. Tessa carried the peaches back to her truck. Claire expected at least a goodbye. Tessa opened the driver's door, hesitated, then faced her across the hood. Don't pull down the trumpet vine, she said. Why? Ruth planted it. It's eating the wall. It does that. That's not a reason to keep it. No. Tessa got in. It isn't. She drove away. Luis watched the truck's taillights disappear. That went well. What does badly look like? She backs over something. He opened the office and pointed Claire toward a chair with gray stuffing exposed through the vinyl. The room held a coffee maker, stacks of invoices, and a wall calendar still turned to May. A handwritten sign above the desk read, "Labor $85 per hour. Advice, $120. You have somebody to pick you up?" he asked. "My coworker, probably. Probably costs more. She's at work." Louise took her car keys and wrote the address on the back of an envelope. "I can tow it in tomorrow morning. Diagnostic is 60. Claire's stomach tightened. What if it's the battery? Then the battery is what I diagnose. What if I already know it's the battery? Then you can tow it here and fix it. He said it pleasantly. Claire almost liked him. "I get paid Friday," she said. "It is Friday, next Friday." Louis set down his pen. He did not look annoyed. That would have been easier too. "What do you do?" he asked. "Bakery at Harlan's Market. The one with the pecan rolls?" "Yes. Those any good?" "No. That bad?" "They're very good. I'm negotiating." Luis leaned against the desk. "Alternator, you're looking at parts plus labor. Starter, same. If a squirrel just loosened your battery cable, we'll both be disappointed." In the squirrel, in the size of the bill, Claire took out her phone. 5%. "Can I charge this?" He plugged it into a cable beside the coffee maker. "I need the back office painted," he said. "Been needing it painted since that calendar was accurate. You put in 8 hours, I don't charge towing or diagnostic. Parts we figure out after." "Why?" "Because I hate painting. You don't know if I'm any good. I know you own a condemned house. You'll have experience soon." Denise answered on the 4th call. "Are you dead?" "No." "Then why are you calling me from Luis Ortega's garage?" Claire looked at the phone. "How do you know where I am? Your location is still shared from when your mother went missing that weekend in Branson. That was 6 years ago. I don't clean out my phone." Denise arrived 25 minutes later, still wearing her pink scrubs and now both socks. She listened to the explanation with her arms folded. "You bought the house." "Yes." "You signed after I told you that you had the face." "Yes." "And now your car is sitting beside the house." "Yes." Denise turned to Luis. "Can I borrow your sign?" "Which one?" "The one about expensive advice." On the drive home, she did not speak until they had passed the courthouse exit. "You could have told me." "I just did." "After signing, you would have tried to stop me." "No, I would have helped you make a list." Claire rested her forehead against the cool window. "I have a list. You have contractor bags and a pry bar. That's not a list. That's what people buy before an emergency room visit. I'm not asking you for money, I know, or a place to stay." Denise's eyes remained on the road. "You already have a place to stay, for now." The phrase hung in the car. Denise sighed. "I didn't mean it like that. You ask when I'll be done using the bathroom shelf. Because you have 9 bottles on it. 3 are shampoo. No one needs 3 shampoos while homeless. I'm not homeless. You bought a house you can't enter." Claire turned toward the window again. Denise's hand tightened on the steering wheel. "That came out wrong. It was accurate. I'm trying to understand what you're doing." "So am I." They drove the rest of the way with the radio off. Luis called the next afternoon while Claire stood in the baking aisle pricing plastic sheeting. "Good news," he said. "Your alternator works. What's the bad news? Your battery cable's corroded through, and the battery is old enough to vote. How much?" "Cable and a decent used battery, 140. Claire closed her eyes. "Parts only," he added. "You still painting?" "Can I split it?" 70 now, 70 next Friday." She looked at her basket. Plastic sheeting, masks, bleach, a box of heavy trash bags. $38 before tax. I can do 50 now. Luis was silent long enough to make her feel the distance between 50 and 70. "Fine," he said. "But you're bringing 6 pecan rolls when you paint. The good ones cost extra, then bring the bad ones." By Monday, her car started on the first turn. The back office at Ortega Automotive had 1 freshly painted wall and 3 remaining walls waiting for Saturday. Claire drove from the garage directly to the farmhouse, where a white contractor's truck sat in the yard. Dean stood beside it with a man whose belt carried 2 phones. "This is Wade Talbot," Dean said. "He does my barn roofs." Wade shook Claire's hand and looked at the house with a professional lack of optimism. Your uncle says you need a number. I need the roof stabilized for inspection. That's not the same as fixed. I know. Wade climbed a ladder, walked only the safest line along the eaves, and came down after 12 minutes. Metal's shot in places. Decking beneath it is gone and more. Rafters over the rear bedroom have spread. Chimney flashing leaks. He entered figures into one phone. Full tear-off. Repair the rafters. New decking where needed. Metal roof. 18,700. Claire laughed. Neither man joined her. What about just enough to stop the water? She asked. Wade rubbed his jaw. I could tarp and brace, but the county may not accept temporary covering as stabilization. How much? 2,800? She laughed again, softer. Dean looked at her. My offer stands. Your 500 doesn't fix the roof. No. It lets you walk away from it. Wade excused himself with the speed of a man who had seen family business become family business. After his truck left, Claire walked to the rear corner. Rain had darkened the rotten sill since Friday. The orange survey flag stood bright and clean against everything failing around them. You knew the estimate would be high, she said. I knew it would be real. Calvin said the house could make it. Calvin hasn't paid retail since 1989. Dean approached carefully. Claire, wanting to prove us wrong is not a construction budget. Maybe I don't care about proving you wrong. You should. At least that would make sense. He left before she could answer. Claire sat on the lowest porch step, staring at the roof. $18,700. Her yearly pay, after taxes, was not much more. Calvin emerged from behind the walnut trees carrying a coil of rope. She did not ask how long he had been listening. Wade's number is fair, he said. Wonderful. For Wade's way of doing it. Claire looked up. Calvin pointed toward the faded tarp. There's a tobacco shed coming down on Cooper Road. Metal's ugly but sound. Rafters can be corrected from inside if the decking gives us enough to stand on. How much? In money? What other currency do roofs take? Time? Favor. Pride, occasionally. I'm low on all three. Then you better find people who aren't. Claire looked toward the road Tessa had taken, then at the mismatched porch posts lying in the grass. Will you help me? Calvin adjusted the rope on his shoulder. No, he said, but I'll be here at 7 tomorrow, and if you're late, I'm leaving. Claire arrived at 6:52, carrying 2 coffees and a bag of biscuits. Calvin was already leaning against his truck. You said 7. I said if you were late, I'd leave. It is not 7. Then we have nothing to discuss. He took 1 coffee and examined the lid as if she might have tampered with it. The tobacco shed stood 5 miles away on the Cooper property, beyond a cattle gate that required Claire to get out, drag it through mud, and close it again after Calvin drove through. You could have opened it, she said, climbing back into his truck. I'm driving. You stopped the truck, still driving. The shed leaned at the far end of a field, roofed in long sheets of corrugated metal, browned with surface rust. One side had already been stripped. Earl Cooper, a thin man with a red face and one arm in a canvas sling, waited beside a flatbed trailer. Shoulder surgery, he told Claire before she could ask. Doctor says I can supervise. Calvin handed him the biscuit bag. You always could. Earl looked inside. Only 3? One's Claire's. I'm doing the most important job. You're eating. That's supervision. The agreement was simple. Earl wanted the shed down before it fell on his mower. Calvin and Claire could take the roof metal if they removed it without leaving nails in the field and stacked the unwanted lumber near Earl's burn pile. Claire looked up at the roof. How do we remove metal from a structure that's already leaning? From the side it isn't leaning toward, Calvin said. That doesn't sound official. Gravity doesn't issue permits. They spent the morning on ladders, loosening screws and sliding the sheets down one at a time. Each panel was longer and heavier than it looked. Rust flaked into Claire's hair. Sweat ran under her work gloves. Calvin climbed only as high as the second rung, directing from below with such precision that she sometimes forgot his right leg was stiff until he turned. Not that screw, he called. They all look the same. That one holds the purlin. What happens if I remove it? Earl gets entertainment. Earl raised his biscuit. Best surgery recovery I've had. By 10, Claire's shoulders burned. She knelt on the edge of the roof, trying to free a stubborn fastener while the metal radiated heat through her jeans. Calvin shaded his eyes. Come down. I almost have it. Come down. If I stop every time something's difficult, we'll be here till Christmas. If you pass out up there, we'll be here till the ambulance. I'm fine. Calvin stared at her. Earl stopped chewing. Claire hated that silence more than an argument. She backed down the ladder, took the water Calvin handed her, and drank too quickly. "You don't win by being the last person standing," he said. "Convenient philosophy for a man sitting on a truck bed." Earl lowered his biscuit. Calvin's face became still. Claire wiped her mouth. "I didn't mean, yes, you did." He walked toward the far side of the shed, his right boot dragging through the grass. Earl watched him go. Car hit him 9 years ago. Claire looked down at the water bottle. "Lady crossed the center line," Earl continued. "Calvin spent 6 months learning to walk twice. Don't expect him to tell you. I didn't ask you to." "No, that's how news works here. Nobody asks." Claire waited until Calvin returned carrying a pry bar. "I'm sorry," she said. He handed it to her. "Fasteners stripped. Pry beneath the ridge, but put your weight over the ladder. That's all? What else you want? I don't know. Punishment. Roof's hot. Go back up." By noon, 10 usable sheets lay on Earl's trailer. The rust was mostly cosmetic, and the holes could be sealed where they overlapped. Calvin estimated they had enough to cover the damaged rear slope with 2 panels left for patching. "How do we get it to the farmhouse?" Claire asked. Earl looked at his truck, which was attached to the trailer. Calvin looked at Earl's sling. All three looked at Claire's Honda. "Roof rack," Earl suggested. Calvin removed his cap and wiped his forehead. "I know a man with a trailer. Is it Dean?" Claire asked. "No. Does the man deny helping people?" "Frequently?" Luis arrived 40 minutes later in the garage's tow truck, eating the final pecan roll from a white bakery box. "These are terrible," he told Claire. "You ate 6. I was checking for consistency." He and Calvin moved the metal onto the tow truck's flatbed, while Claire collected every loose screw she could find. Earl followed behind her with a magnet on a stick, supervising with renewed purpose. At the farmhouse, Luis unloaded the sheets near the porch. "So," he said, looking at the roof, "when does this become a house? When it stops trying to kill me?" That was not a date. Calvin untied the rope. "She needs blocking for the rear wall." Luis glanced toward the bowed siding. "I have old jack stands." Automotive stands aren't structural support. They hold 2-ton trucks. Trucks are designed to be held there. Wood doesn't know what it was designed for. Calvin stared at him. Luis smiled. "I'll bring cribbing." Claire listened to them discuss load points, both pretending the conversation had nothing to do with offering help. Marlene arrived with lemonade and a stack of mismatched work gloves. She had also brought a folding chair for Calvin, which he refused to use until she threatened to sit in it herself. By late afternoon, the salvage panels had been cleaned with wire brushes and sorted. They were ugly, scratched, and different shades of rust, but when Claire ran her palm over one, the metal felt solid. "How much did I save?" she asked. Calvin sat reluctantly in Marlene's chair. "If you don't count labor, I count mine as free." "Don't. It is free." That's how people end up promising more than they own. Marlene poured lemonade into a plastic cup. "He means about $1,200 in material." Claire looked at the stacked sheets again. $1,200 was more than she had earned from 3 weeks of 5 in the morning shifts. It sat in her yard because 3 people had spent a Saturday sweating over a collapsing tobacco shed. "Thank you," she said. Calvin waved one hand as if moving smoke. Luis accepted the words with a nod. Marlene said, "You can thank me by returning my dish. It's washed." Then this relationship has a future. A white SUV turned into the lane. Mallory parked carefully beyond the dust and emerged in sandals unsuited to the yard. She lifted a cardboard box from the back. "I called," she said. "My phone was in the house. I know. I heard it ringing when I tried again." Mallory took in the people, the metal, and the braced porch. "This is more activity than I expected." "Claire's forming a militia," Marlene said. "Marlene Brooks?" Still. Mallory's posture changed into the respectful stiffness she used around people who remembered her before the cream suits. "I brought some things," she told Claire. The box contained chipped coffee mugs, 2 faded dish towels, a bundle of wooden spoons, and a stack of old recipe cards held together with a rubber band. On top lay a framed photograph of Ruth, standing beside the farmhouse in a wide-brimmed hat. Claire lifted it. "I thought they belonged here," Mallory said. "Not in your future dining room?" Mallory's expression cooled. "I was trying to do something nice. It looks like you cleaned out a junk drawer." You think I kept everything valuable and brought you trash, did you? Mallory glanced toward the others. Calvin became fascinated by his lemonade. Luis inspected a rope knot. I brought what had a connection to the house, Mallory said quietly. You inherited the house. For $1, you chose it. Claire set the photograph back in the box. Where's Grandma's kitchen table? Mallory's fingers tightened around one cardboard flap. In Dad's equipment barn. Why? It wouldn't fit in my storage unit. I want it. I'm going to use it. Where? When I buy a house. You have a condo. A table that size won't fit in it. It fits here. Mallory looked through the open door toward the empty dining room. For a moment, she seemed to see the pale rectangle where the table had stood. Grandma left the contents to me, she said. There was apology in her voice, which made the refusal worse. Claire nodded. Right. Claire, you should go before your shoes catch something. Mallory set the box down too hard. One of the mugs knocked against the frame. I didn't write the will, she said. No. You just wore it to the meeting. Her hand flew to her bare throat. She was not wearing the pearls now. Marlene stood. There's lemonade. I don't want lemonade. Nobody ever does when they need it. Mallory stared at her, then surprised Claire by taking the offered cup. She drank while standing in the yard, angry and overdressed. Luis found somewhere else to be. Calvin began sorting bolts that were already sorted. Mallory looked at the roof metal. Is that going on the house? That's the theory. It's rusty. It was within budget. I could help pay for something better. Claire laughed once. You offered to pay the $1 too. I don't know what you want from me. The table. Besides the table. Claire looked at her cousin. Sweat had dampened Mallory's hair at the temples. A mosquito hovered beside her cheek, and she slapped it with none of her usual elegance. I want you to stop offering help that lets you keep everything you want. Mallory's eyes shone, but her voice remained level. And I want you to stop acting like being given the worst thing makes you the best person. Neither of them moved. Marlene quietly took the lemonade cup from Mallory's hand before it collapsed. Mallory returned to her SUV. At the door, she looked back at the cardboard box. The recipe with the grease stain is her dumplings, she said. She left out the pepper when she wrote it. Use more than it says. Then she drove away. Claire carried the box inside after everyone left. She set the mugs in the sink, the spoons on the counter, and the photograph on the mantel beside Ruth's crushed straw hat. The recipe cards went into the pantry. In the dining room, evening light fell across the empty space where the table belonged. Claire sat on the floor inside that pale rectangle and ate the last cold biscuit from the morning, furious at herself for tasting the pepper it needed. Rain began tapping the dining room window before Claire finished the biscuit. She carried the cardboard box away from the damp wall, set a bucket beneath a dark spot in the ceiling, and ran outside. The salvaged roof panels lay stacked on narrow blocks, but the plastic Calvin had thrown over them lifted at one corner. Claire caught it before the wind did. The rain thickened almost at once. She dragged 2 cinder blocks from beneath the porch and set them on the plastic. By the time she reached her car, her shirt clung to her back and water ran from her hair into her eyes. Inside the Honda, she watched the farmhouse disappear behind moving silver. Water spilled from the broken gutters. The trumpet vine thrashed against the rear wall. Somewhere beneath the roof, the buckets were filling. She could hear individual drops striking metal inside the house, each one landing where water had no business being. Her phone buzzed. Denise, you coming home? Claire typed, waiting out rain. 3 dots appeared in the condemned house. Car. Another pause. Denise. Better have gas. Claire looked at the fuel gauge, which hovered below a quarter. She switched off the engine and sat in the wet heat until the storm passed. The roof work began in earnest 2 mornings later. Calvin had marked each salvage panel in chalk and drawn a diagram on the back of an old seed catalog. Luis arrived with ropes, cribbing, and a tool belt that looked professionally reassuring. Marlene brought a cooler and announced that no one would touch her lunch until they demonstrated visible regard for survival. Claire climbed the ladder first. Calvin caught the back of her jeans with 2 fingers. Harness? I'm only going to the eave. Ground doesn't care where you were headed. Luis handed her the borrowed harness. He made me wear one too. You work under suspended trucks. Trucks are more honest than houses. They tied off to a rope passed over the ridge. Calvin stayed below, directing the removal of damaged sheets while Luis and Claire worked from roof ladders. The old metal screamed as screws came loose. Beneath it, Blackened decking crumbled around the nail holes. Claire pushed her gloved finger through one patch without trying. Luis looked at the hole. "Don't do that again. I barely touched it." "Exactly." Calvin climbed onto the porch roof for a better view. He stared upward, jaw set. "How bad?" Claire called. Wade wasn't lying. "I didn't ask about Wade's moral condition." "You need more decking than we figured." "How much more?" Calvin pointed to a span between two rafters. "Everything from the chimney to the rear gable." Claire followed the line with her eyes. It was nearly half the slope. "What happens if we put the metal over what's here?" Luis answered before Calvin could. "It holds until somebody steps on the wrong place, or snow loads it, or wind gets underneath. So temporary, so dangerous with good timing." Claire sat back against the roof ladder. Below her, the yard looked orderly for the first time. Tools arranged on tarps, water coolers beneath the walnut tree, salvage panels waiting in rows. The bad decking turned all the order into theater. A tractor appeared beyond the trees. Dean was towing a hay rake along the equipment track that bordered Claire's parcel. He stopped when he saw Luis's tow truck parked partly across it. Dean shut down the tractor. "Whose truck?" Luis raised a hand from the roof. "Mine." "You need to move it. We're lifting metal from that side. That track stays clear." Claire climbed down carefully. "For what?" "For equipment." "Are you bringing equipment through now?" "I just did." "You got through." Dean pointed at the tow truck's rear tire. "That tire is on my property." Claire looked at the orange survey flag 6 feet away. "It is not. The track curves. The flag doesn't." Dean's eyes went to Calvin. "You told her she could use it?" Calvin remained on the porch roof. "She can read a survey." "This isn't about reading." "No," Claire said. "It's about you planting those flags and getting upset when I believe them." Dean removed his cap and slapped dust from it against his leg. "I'm trying to run a farm. I can't have trucks and strangers blocking access every weekend." Luis looked down from the ladder. "I'm not a stranger. You know what I mean." "Usually." Marlene stepped between the tractor and the argument, carrying a paper plate. "Dean, eat a sandwich." "I don't want a sandwich. That family should put it on a crest." He stared at her, then at the plate. "What kind?" "Ham." Dean took it. The absurdity lowered the temperature, but only slightly. Claire pointed toward the tow truck. "We need 2 more hours." "1," Dean said. "Then keep vehicles on your parcel. You gave me a strip barely wide enough for a driveway." "I didn't give you anything. Mom wrote the survey. Convenient how the dead woman keeps doing all this." Dean stopped chewing. Claire regretted it before he answered. "You're right," he said. "I'll put a chain across the track so there's no confusion." He climbed onto the tractor with half the sandwich still in his hand. Calvin watched him drive away. That went well. Claire looked at Tessa's orchard across the road. Apparently, this is what well looks like. They covered the exposed section with heavy plastic and battens before quitting. The salvage panels could not go up until Claire found plywood or plank decking strong enough to carry them. Calvin knew of a sawmill that sold imperfect boards cheaply, but cheaply still meant money. "How much?" she asked. "Maybe 600. She laughed without sound. Luis removed his tool belt. "I can front some." "No, you haven't heard terms. I'm already painting your office. Awning needs stitching too. You're negotiating with labor I haven't performed. That's what banks do, but less honestly." Claire shook her head. Calvin folded the roof diagram. "There's a deconstruction lot in West Plains. Sometimes they have used lumber." "Sometimes," Claire repeated. "Call Monday. They'll ask for money Monday." Marlene snapped the cooler closed. "Your problem is, you think accepting help and taking orders are the same thing." Claire picked up a coil of rope. "My problem is a $600 hole. Those are your 2 current problems." On Monday, the deconstruction lot had enough soundboards for the roof section. They wanted $480 cash and could hold them for only 2 days. Claire sat in her Honda outside Harlan's Market and checked her bank balance 3 times, as if repetition might encourage growth. After rent to Denise, the second payment to Luis, gas, and groceries, she had $117. She went inside for her shift. Wanda was waiting beside the time clock. "You were supposed to be here at 4:30. Claire looked at the clock. 4:43. "I'm sorry. That word is losing market value. My alarm didn't. I don't care what your alarm did. Doe does not listen to circumstances." Claire tied on her apron. "I can stay late. You stayed late Friday, and then you put salt in the streusel." Claire closed her eyes. She had known something tasted wrong. She had blamed a new brand of butter. Wanda lowered her voice. You look exhausted. I'm fine. Fine people don't glaze a cooling rack. It was beside the donuts. Exactly. Claire glanced toward the bakery doors. Are you firing me? I'm considering whether you are trying to make me. The question struck harder than accusation. I need this job. Then decide what gets the awake version of you. Wanda handed her a clean apron. One more late arrival, I cut your hours. One more safety mistake, I have no choice. Claire worked the shift without checking her phone. She measured every ingredient twice and labeled every tray. At noon, she bought the day-old rolls Wanda was about to discard and drove them to Ortega Automotive. Luis was beneath a sedan. Only his boots showed. I have a proposal, Claire said. That sentence always costs me. I need a trailer and $480, he rolled out. For what? Roof decking. What do I get? The rest of the office, the awning, and breakfast trays for a month. From Harlan's? Day old, unless you develop taste. Luis considered. 300. I need 480. I heard the number. I'll pay the balance in 2 weeks. Your car will need tires before then. Please don't diagnose things I'm not asking about. He slid back beneath the sedan. 350? Claire waited. A wrench turned above him. 375, he said. That is my final act of poor judgment. It still left her short. Marlene bought the crushed straw hat for $105. Claire had not offered it. Marlene saw it on the mantel that afternoon, picked it up, and asked what price would make Claire stop objecting. It's not worth anything. Neither is most art. It was Ruth's. Then she owes me. I drove her to St. Louis twice, and she complained about my turn signals the whole way. Claire held the hat against her chest. You can't pay $105 for this. I can. Calvin got the family's practical sense. I got the pension. Marlene placed 5 20s and a $5 bill on the mantel where the hat had sat. Then she put it on her head. It dropped over one eye. Claire started laughing. Marlene tilted the brim. Am I radiant? You look like a mushroom. A wealthy mushroom. The laugh broke loose until Claire had to sit on the porch step. It was too loud, too close to crying, and Marlene kindly pretended not to notice the difference. They collected the boards the next day. Luis hauled them. Calvin inspected every piece. By sunset, the new decking covered the worst span, and the first 2 salvage panels lay fastened above it. From the ground, the rusted metal looked like a patch on worn-out overalls. Claire loved it. She stayed after everyone left, sealing screw heads while the light faded. By the time she climbed down, it was nearly midnight. Denise's house was 40 minutes away. Her shift began at 4:30. Claire folded the Honda's back seat, wedged a sweatshirt against the door for a pillow, and set her phone alarm for 3:45. She told herself it was one night. The farmhouse stood black beyond the windshield, dry beneath the first section of its new roof. Claire fell asleep, listening to the soft tick of cooling metal. The alarm sounded inside Claire's ribcage. She jerked upright, struck her forehead against the window, and spent several seconds fighting a sweatshirt she had somehow wrapped around her neck. The windshield had fogged white. Her lower back felt welded at an angle. When she opened the door, cool air entered along with the smell of wet grass. 3:47. Claire climbed out and stretched beside the car. The farmhouse was only a shape against the stars. Somewhere near the porch, an animal moved through the weeds. That better be the mouse, she whispered. I own him money. She brushed her teeth with bottled water, changed shirts behind the open car door, and reached Harlan's at 4:28. Wanda looked at the clock, then at Claire. Don't celebrate, she said. I wasn't. You had a victorious expression. My face is stuck from sleeping wrong. Wanda's eyes narrowed. Where did you sleep? In a bed-shaped location. Claire, the mixers are waiting. She escaped into the bakery and worked with the intense concentration of someone defusing dough. Flour, yeast, water, sugar. She checked every label before scooping and kept her phone locked in her locker. When the Pixon rolls came out evenly browned, Wanda inspected them without comment. At the end of the shift, she set a small paper cup of coffee beside Claire. It was not forgiveness, but it was fresh. The chain appeared across the equipment track that afternoon. Dean had strung it between 2 new steel posts beyond the orange survey flags. A private farm access sign hung in the middle, its lettering so clean, Claire could smell the hardware store. Calvin examined it from the farmhouse side. He set those posts deep. I'm happy he found time during harvest. Anger improves a man's scheduling. Luis's trailer, loaded with the remaining boards, could no longer approach the rear wall. They carried the lumber from the front drive instead, one plank at a time around the house. Dean passed twice on his tractor. He did not look toward them. On the third trip, Claire stopped at the boundary and held up one end of a 16-foot board. You could unlock it for 20 minutes. Dean slowed but did not stop. Track needs to remain clear. It is clear. He pointed toward the trailer with his chin. Wouldn't be if I unlocked it. You're making us carry everything an extra 100 yards. I didn't buy your building materials. No, you bought a sign. Dean drove on. Luis came up beside her, carrying his end of the board. He practices speeches while he bails. He's good at them. He used to be fun. Claire glanced at him. Luis shrugged. Not around you, apparently. They had installed 3 more panels by evening when Tessa's truck turned into the lane. The peach crate sat on the passenger seat again, piled higher this time. She got out and surveyed the roof without greeting anyone. It's ugly, she said. Claire wiped sweat from her chin. You came all this way for that? I can see it from the orchard. Then you could have insulted it from home. Tessa's gaze moved to the rolled sweatshirt visible through the Honda's rear window, then to the bottle and toothbrush in the cup holder. Claire stepped between her and the car. Tessa did not ask. She lifted the crate from the passenger seat and placed it on the ground. Wind knocked these down. What do you want me to do with them? Whatever you were going to do when you offered to help. You said you didn't need help. I didn't then. The peaches were bruised and warm from the sun. A few had split at the stems. I don't have a kitchen, Claire said. Marlene does. You already talked to her? I'm talking to you. Tessa returned to the driver's side. Do you ever answer the question people ask? Claire called. Tessa rested one hand on the open door. Your mother asked questions she'd already decided how I should answer. That doesn't have anything to do with me. No, Tessa said. It doesn't. She drove away before Claire could decide whether that was an apology. Marlene's kitchen smelled of vinegar, sugar, and the lemon hand cream she kept beside the sink. Her cabinets were painted yellow. Every drawer closed properly, which made Claire distrust the place. They worked across from each other at a narrow counter, peeling peaches and dropping slices into a heavy pot. Claire's hands became sticky to the wrists. You're cutting away too much, Marlene said. They're bruised. Bruised isn't rotten. Everything here comes with a lesson. Only if you do it wrong. Claire trimmed another peach more carefully. Marlene stirred sugar into the pot. Ruth's straw hat hung on a hook beside the refrigerator, still dented at the crown. Did Grandma really drive to St. Louis with you? Claire asked. Cardiologist. She hated my car. What was wrong with it? The cup holders were too small. The seatbelt touched her neck, and the turn signal made a clicking sound. They do that, I explained. Did she listen? She informed me Dean's truck didn't click that loudly. Claire smiled despite herself. She could be difficult, Marlene said. Everyone says that after telling me how generous she was. People are greedy for consistency. Ruth didn't provide it. The peaches simmered. Marlene skimmed foam from the surface with a spoon. She sat beside my hospital bed every afternoon after Calvain's accident, she continued. Never asked if I wanted company, never brought anything useful. Just sat there knitting something she never finished. That sounds almost kind. It was kind. She also told me crying in public made other people responsible for my face. Claire looked at the bubbling pot. That sounds more familiar. A knock came at the back door, followed immediately by Tessa entering. I came for the crate. Marlene did not turn. It's on the porch. Tessa stopped when she saw the jars lined across the table. You used all of them? You brought all of them, Claire said. I thought some might not be good. Bruised isn't rotten, Claire and Marlene said together. Tessa's mouth twitched. Marlene pointed the spoon toward a pile of lids. Wash those. I came for the crate. You drove 4 miles for a wooden box? It's a good box, then earn it. Tessa washed the lids. For the next hour, the 3 women moved around one another with the strained coordination of people pretending the room held no history. Marlene filled jars. Claire wiped rims. Tessa tightened rings, then loosened them when Marlene accused her of trying to strangle the glass. Elaine's name entered the room only when Claire bit into a peach slice. My mother used to put salt on these. Tessa's hands stopped beneath the water, only if they weren't ripe. She put salt on everything. Later, maybe. The correction was small and sharp. Claire set down the slice. You knew her before later. Yes. Then she died, and you didn't speak to me at the funeral. Marlene lowered a jar into the water bath with exaggerated care. Tessa dried her hands. You were surrounded by people, not anybody I knew. You had Ruth. Ruth left. The jar lid in Tessa's hand made a soft pop as the center flexed. Claire waited. Tessa placed it on the towel. I didn't know what you wanted from me. You could have said hello. Yes. No excuse followed. Claire had prepared herself to fight an excuse. The single word left her with nowhere to put the anger. Marlene handed Tessa another lid. This one's still dirty. Tessa washed it. When the jam was finished, Marlene divided the jars into 3 boxes. Tessa objected to taking any. They're your peaches, Claire said. They're your labor, Marlene's sugar. My gas, Marlene added. We may need arbitration. Tessa took 4 jars. Claire took 6, though she did not know where she would store them. At the door, Tessa touched the brim of Ruth's hat. She never wore this gardening, she said it made her look frivolous. It makes Marlene look like a mushroom. I heard that, Marlene called. For the first time, Tessa laughed in front of Claire. It was brief and surprisingly low. The sound followed Claire back to the farmhouse. The roof patch took another 5 days. Claire worked mornings at Harlan's, afternoons at the house, and one evening repairing the seam on Luis's garage awning with waxed thread and a curved upholstery needle she had kept from Elaine's sewing kit. Luis held the flashlight while she stitched. You know how to do everything nobody pays enough for, he said. My mother taught me. She fixed my seat once. What seat? First tow truck, vinyl split straight down the middle. She said it looked indecent. Claire pulled the thread tight. Did she return the tool? Luis smiled, eventually. On Sunday, the last salvage panel went into place over the rear slope. Calvin made Claire inspect every overlap and reseal 2 rows of screws he considered doubtful. Then they climbed down and waited beneath the porch while Luis sprayed the roof with a garden hose. Water streamed into the gutters and spilled from the broken downspout. Claire checked the upstairs ceiling from the landing, unwilling to step farther. No dark stains spread across it. In Elaine's room, beyond the unsafe floor, the ceiling remained dry. One section, Calvin reminded her when she returned outside. Front slope still needs attention. Rear wall needs blocking. Electrical is its own disaster. Claire looked up at the rusted patch glowing red-brown in the late sun. One section, she agreed. That night, she slept in the Honda again. Then the next. On the 3rd morning, someone knocked hard on the window at 4:15. Claire woke with a scream and found Denise's face on the other side of the glass. She opened the door. What are you doing here? I could ask you the same thing, but your toothbrush answers. Denise wore sweatpants and a coat thrown over her sleep shirt. Her hair stuck up along one side. You drove 40 minutes? You stopped coming home. I've been busy. You told me you were working late. I was. You told me you slept at Luis's sister's. I said near Luis's. You said, I stayed close to Luis. That is do not technically me from a condemned yard at 4 in the morning. Claire climbed out. Her hip cramped and she had to catch the car door. Denise saw it. Her anger shifted toward fear, which Claire could not bear. I'm saving gas, Claire said. You're saving $12 by folding yourself into a Honda. It's temporary. Everything with you is temporary until it becomes your life. The farmhouse stood behind Claire, patched roof visible in the first gray light. I didn't ask you to come. No. You arranged it so nobody could find out you needed anything. I have a place. This is not a place. It's a dare. Claire crossed her arms against the cold. Your spare room isn't mine. I know. It's mine. I was letting you use it. You asked when I'd stop. I asked about the bathroom shelf. You asked about all of it without asking. Denise's face fell. Claire, I wanted 1 drawer. I heard you. No. You heard eviction because that's the language you're fluent in. Claire looked away. Denise reached into her coat pocket and took out the spare room key Claire had left on the kitchen table. She held it toward her. You do not have to earn a bed every night, she said. Claire stared at the key. Then, from inside the farmhouse, came a long, splintering crack. Both women turned. The temporary support beneath the rear kitchen wall shifted sideways and dropped into the mud. The siding above it lurched half an inch, shaking loose a shower of dirt. Denise closed her fingers around the key. What was that? Claire was already running. Claire reached the back corner before sense caught up with her feet. The The timber brace had kicked out from beneath the sill and lay flat in the mud. The rotten wall above it sagged toward the opening, held by two dark studs and whatever stubbornness remained in the siding. She stepped closer. Denise seized the belt loop of her jeans. "Do not. I need to see inside. You need to remain outside of what's falling. If the kitchen joist shifted, you don't know what those words mean. I know enough. You know enough to be scared. You're skipping that part." A low creak came from the wall. Both women backed away. Claire pulled out her phone. Calvin did not answer. She called again. His voice arrived thick with sleep. "Somebody dead?" "Not yet." "Then call after 6. The rear brace slipped. He was silent for 1 second. "Get away from the wall. I am. Farther than you think." She moved toward Denise. "Anybody inside?" "No. I'll be there." He hung up. Denise stared at Claire. "That was Calvin?" "Yes. He sounds delightful before coffee. He sounds like that after coffee, too." Calvin's truck came down the lane 14 minutes later, followed by Luis in the tow truck. Claire had called only Calvin, but Luis climbed out pulling coveralls over his t-shirt. "Phone tree," he explained. "I didn't know we had one. We don't. Calvin called me and said the house was trying something." Calvin walked straight to the rear corner. He crouched as close as he considered safe and shone a flashlight beneath the sill. "Ground softened," he said. "Block tipped." Brace followed. Denise stood beside Claire with her arms folded tightly. "Can it fall?" "Yes." Claire looked at Calvin. He aimed the light higher. "Not this minute." "You say comforting things like a ransom note," Denise muttered. Luis unloaded hardwood cribbing and 2 broad steel plates. They built a stable base several feet from the wall, then positioned a bottle jack beneath a temporary beam. Calvin made Claire stay clear while Luis raised it 1/4 turn at a time. The farmhouse groaned. "Stop," Calvin said. Luis stopped. Calvin crouched, checked the top of the beam, and motioned for another 1/4 turn. Claire watched the gap beneath the sill narrow. Her body leaned with it, as if wanting hard enough might count as force. Denise touched her elbow. "Breathe. I am." "You've been holding it since I arrived." The wall lifted barely 1/2 inch. It was enough for Calvin to slide 2 new braces onto the steel plates. Luis lowered the jack until the load settled. Nothing moved. Calvin remained crouched for a while, studying the supports. "That buys time," he said. "How much?" "Time doesn't come labeled." Claire looked at the rear wall. "Can we replace the sill?" "We can replace sections. Need to support the kitchen floor from beneath. Open the siding, see how many studs are gone. How much lumber? Some. That's not a quantity. It's the quantity I know before we open it." Denise stepped forward. "How many people are going under that house?" Calvin looked at her. "Ideally none. Crawlspace access is from the cellar." "There's a cellar?" Claire pointed toward the kitchen. "Doors under some fallen cabinets." Denise's eyes widened. "You found a cellar and didn't mention it? It's not an exciting cellar. Every hidden underground room in a condemned house is exciting for the wrong reason." Luis leaned against the jack handle. "I like her. She has a room with a bed," Claire said. "Apparently that makes her reckless." Denise put the spare room key into Claire's palm and folded Claire's fingers over it. "Tonight." Claire did not promise, but she did not give it back. Calvin stood with difficulty. Claire saw the brief tightening around his mouth before he put weight on his right leg. "You all right?" she asked. "No." The honesty startled her. He brushed mud from his knees. "Storm coming Thursday. Those braces need a cover, and the front roof tarp needs more battens. I'll do it. After work. I know. Not at midnight. I know." Calvin stared until Claire looked away. The county inspector arrived Thursday afternoon, while Claire was fastening the final batten over the front slope. His name was Arnold Voss, and he had the permanently squinting expression of a man who distrusted ladders, promises, and adjectives. He wore tan work pants and carried a clipboard in a clear plastic sleeve because the sky had turned the color of bruised steel. "You made progress," he said. Claire climbed down. That sounded almost positive. It was an observation. He examined the patched rear roof, tested the temporary porch brace, and stood several feet from the bowed kitchen wall. That moved since the initial report. 1/2 inch, maybe less. "We reset the support. Temporary support. For now. Mr." Voss wrote something. Claire resisted the urge to look over his shoulder. "What do I need for stabilization?" "Rear wall must be secured against further displacement." Roof envelope needs to prevent continued water intrusion. Electrical hazards have to be removed or corrected before service restoration. I'm not trying to restore service yet. You need service for final occupancy. For structural stabilization, I need the damaged circuits disconnected at the panel and exposed wiring made safe. That sounds less expensive. It is not my job to rank your expenses. Wind moved through the walnut leaves with a dry hiss. Mr. Voss looked up at the sky. This tarp won't like tonight. I added battens. The fabric's old. It came with the house. That doesn't make it historic. He inspected the interior from the safe rooms, refusing the stairs and the kitchen. At the front door, he removed a form from beneath the plastic cover. You have 18 days, he said. Claire took the paper. The original deadline gives me longer. The original order requires demonstrated progress. The rear displacement triggers a correction notice. Stabilize the wall and make the electrical hazard safe within 18 days. And the original schedule continues. And if I don't? He met her eyes. The county moves the structure toward demolition. Rain struck the clipboard in 3 large drops. Mr. Voss headed for his truck. Do not remain inside during the storm. I don't remain inside at all. His gaze went to the Honda. The sweatshirt was no longer visible, but the bottle of mouthwash sat in the door pocket. Inside includes attached porches, he said. Then he left. Claire stood under the porch roof, reading the correction notice until the wind tore it from her hands. She chased it across the yard, caught it against an orange boundary flag, and folded it into her back pocket. Her phone showed 2 messages. Wanda, storm worsening, closing bakery at 4. Be here regular time tomorrow unless road's unsafe. Denise, I made soup. Your bed remains annoyingly available. Claire typed, coming after I secure tarp. She hesitated, then added, I have been sleeping in car. I'm sorry I lied, Denise replied, before Claire could put away the phone. I know. That was the argument. A second message followed. Be careful, not brave. Careful! The first gust strong enough to move the roof arrived at 5:30. Calvin had told Claire to leave by 5. She stayed to move the tools into her car and dragged the salvage boards under plastic. Rain swept across the field in pale sheets. The trumpet vines struck the siding over and over. The front tarp snapped like a flag. Claire ran to the side yard, then stopped. The ladder lay flat where she had placed it. Even if she raised it, climbing would be impossible. A batten ripped free and spun into the weeds. No, she said. The tarp ballooned. For a second, it held an enormous pocket of rain. Then the fabric tore down the middle with a sound like canvas splitting beside her ear. Half flew over the ridge. The other half slapped against the upstairs windows. Claire got into the Honda as the storm broke over the yard. Wind rocked the car. Branches struck the roof. Rain erased the farmhouse, then revealed it in white bursts of lightning. Water poured through the open front section where the tarp had been. Claire called Calvin. No, he said before she spoke. I didn't ask yet. You're not getting on the roof. Water's going in. Let it. The upstairs, let it. Elaine's room is under that section. There was a pause. Calvin's voice softened without becoming gentle. House can dry. You can't undo dead. Claire pressed the phone against her forehead. Drive to Denise, he said. Now, before the creek rises. She looked at the lane, already covered by shallow moving water. Claire, I'm going. She drove slowly, both hands rigid on the wheel. At the highway, she passed Tessa's truck heading toward the orchard, windshield wipers fighting the rain. For an instant, their headlights crossed. Tessa raised one hand. Claire did the same. Denise had left the porch light on. She met Claire at the door with a towel and did not say, I told you so. That mercy nearly undid her. The roof tore, Claire said. I figured something tore. Mom's room is going to be soaked. Denise wrapped the towel around her shoulders. Then tomorrow, you deal with a soaked room. The inspector gave me 18 days. Tomorrow still counts as one of them. Claire sat at Denise's kitchen table, wet jeans dripping onto the floor. A bowl of soup waited in front of her. The milk beside the coffee maker had a new sticky note. Claire. May use this. She laughed once and covered her face. Denise placed a spoon beside the bowl. Eat before you become emotional over dairy. The storm lasted most of the night. At first light, Claire returned to the farmhouse. Branches covered the lane. The chain across Dean's track had survived perfectly, its sign hanging straight. Calvin and Luis were already in the yard. No one spoke as they looked up. The tarp had torn away from the entire front slope. 2 pieces of old roof metal had peeled back near the chimney. An upstairs window stood open, its sash broken inward. Claire climbed only as far as the landing. Water dripped from the ceiling onto the stairs. The hallway floor shone black. Elaine's door had swollen nearly shut. Claire pushed it with one shoulder until it opened enough to see inside. Rain had entered through the ceiling and broken window. The stained wallpaper sagged in sheets. A section of plaster had fallen across the floor. Against one wall, the narrow closet door hung open. The room was empty. Of course it was empty. Still, Claire stood at the threshold as if something living had been hurt. Behind her, a floorboard creaked. Tessa stood on the landing. "You shouldn't be up here," Claire said. "Neither should you." "How did you get in?" "Door." Claire looked back into the room. "I thought there might be something left." Tessa did not pretend to misunderstand. Elaine took everything she cared about. Did she? Yes. The certainty in Tessa's voice made Claire turn. Tessa held a folded blue tarp beneath one arm. "The orchard lost 3 limbs and part of the packing shed roof," she said. "I could use help clearing it. Today, when this is covered." Claire stared at the tarp. Tessa looked past her into Elaine's ruined room. "Your mother hated rain at night. Said it made every house sound temporary." Claire swallowed. She was right. "No," Tessa said. "She was scared." Below them, Calvin called that the floor was unsafe. Tessa stepped back toward the stairs. "Come on. We'll cover what we can." Outside, Dean waited beside his truck, surveying the damage. He did not say the house was finished. He did not need to. Instead, he held out a folded sheet of paper. "My offer," he said. I changed the number. Claire did not take it. "How much?" 5,000. Behind her, Luis and Calvin began unfolding Tessa's tarp across the wet grass. Dean lowered the paper. "You have 18 days, Claire." She looked from the ruined front roof to the bowed rear wall, then toward the upstairs window where rainwater still dripped from the sill. For the first time since paying the $1, she could not imagine what stubbornness was supposed to do next. Claire left Dean holding the offer and went to help spread Tessa's tarp. No one asked what number was written on the paper. Calvin told Luis where to place the ladder. Tessa tied one corner of the tarp to a porch column and pulled until the fabric stretched tight across the grass. "We need it over the ridge before the next rain," Calvin said. Claire put on the harness. Her hands shook while fastening the buckle. She blamed the cold. They worked for 3 hours. The wind had dropped, but every surface remained slick. Luis and Claire climbed opposite roof ladders while Calvin directed from below. Tessa fed rope through an upstairs window from the dry side of the hallway. Dean stayed long enough to watch the blue tarp rise over the front slope, then placed the folded offer beneath Claire's windshield wiper and drove away. When the last batten was screwed down, Calvin tested the tarp from the eave. "It'll keep ordinary rain out," he said. "What about extraordinary rain? It'll keep some of that out." Claire climbed down and found mud covering her jeans to the knees. A cut across one knuckle had bled into her glove. Tessa waited beside the truck. "Orchard?" Claire looked toward the house. "You said you'd help," Tessa reminded her. "I know what I said." So did Elaine. The words came with no raised voice, which made them worse. Claire removed the glove. "Does everything I do have to take a detour through my mother?" Tessa lifted a fallen branch from the road and dragged it aside. "Only the things that already know the way." Claire almost refused. She wanted to go inside, empty buckets, list damage, calculate impossible numbers. Instead, she climbed into Luis's tow truck, and all 4 of them followed Tessa across the road. The orchard looked as if a giant hand had raked through it. Peach limbs lay split beneath the trees, leaves plastered to the ground. One section of the packing shed roof had peeled upward and folded over itself. Damaged fruit made the wet grass smell fermented. Tessa handed Claire a pruning saw. "Cut clean below the break. You gonna supervise my technique? I'm going to work." She did. For 2 hours, Tessa hauled branches until her shirt darkened with sweat. Calvin ran the chainsaw from the ground, while Luis pulled limbs clear with the tow truck. Claire sawed until the muscles in her back turned hard and hot. The work was easier because it belonged to someone else. No memory waited inside the branches. No county deadline was attached to a peach tree. When a limb fell, it was only a limb. At noon, Marlene appeared with ham sandwiches. Dean was not there to refuse one. They ate beneath the packing shed overhang. Tessa sat on an overturned crate and drank water from a canning jar. Claire occupied the dry end of a lumber stack. "How many trees did you lose?" Louise asked. "2 entirely. Maybe 6 more after I see how they heal. Insurance cover the shed?" After the deductible, Calvin opened his sandwich. "Metal can be flattened." Tessa nodded toward the farmhouse. "Claire used all the ugly metal." "There's always more ugly metal," Calvin said. Claire looked at Tessa. "Why'd you bring the tarp?" "I had one. You have lots of things. Most of them stayed home." Tessa folded the corner of her sandwich wrapper. "I got tired of watching you do it badly." It was almost a Calvin answer. Claire let her keep it. The first electrician arrived 3 days later. He spent 40 minutes examining the panel, tracing exposed wires, and making disapproving noises in the kitchen doorway. The old cloth-covered circuits had been cut and spliced so many times that he called the system folk art. To make it safe for the correction notice, he said, "I can disconnect everything beyond the front rooms, remove the exposed runs, cap the service, and document it." 1460. That's without turning anything on? That is specifically without turning anything on. Claire thanked him and watched his van leave. The rear wall was worse after they removed the siding. 3 studs had rotted at the bottom. The sill came away in handfuls. One kitchen joist had been resting partly on packed dirt. Calvin stood in the opening with his arms folded. "How much?" Claire asked. "Materials, maybe 800 if we use rough-sawn timber. More if we find surprises." "You always find surprises." "Then more." Claire wrote both figures in the notebook Denise had insisted she start using. Electrical, $1,460. Rear wall, $800 plus. Front roof edge, unknown. Inspection fee, $85. She had $241, a used battery she still owed Luis for, and 6 jars of peach jam. At Denise's kitchen table that evening, she spread out receipts, estimates, and a pay stub. Denise sat across from her in reading glasses, pressing buttons on a calculator. "You're not counting food," Denise said. "I can eat at work. You can eat 1 meal at work. I have jam. Jam is not a financial strategy. It is if you stop needing teeth." Denise removed her glasses. "I can lend you 300. "No. I have it. That isn't the point." "Then explain the point." Claire looked at the column of numbers. "If I take 300 from you, then 4 from Luis, then materials from Calvin, then food from Marlene, what part of this is mine?" "The condemned part." "Exactly." Denise pushed the calculator aside. "You think ownership means nobody gets to touch the weight. I think adults pay for what they choose. Adults also borrow jumper cables. That is not the same." "No, because jumper cables are less interesting to be tragic about." Claire gathered the papers. Denise stopped her. "What happens if you can't do it?" "The county starts demolition." "And Dean gets what he wanted. Is that why you're doing this?" "No." The answer came quickly, but not falsely. Claire looked down at Ruth's photograph among the receipts. She had brought it from the mantel after the storm, so the damp would not reach it. "I don't know why I'm doing it anymore," she said. Denise's expression softened. "That is a better reason to stop than running out of money." Claire returned the next morning to find a padlock on the chain across Dean's equipment track. Calvin was already opening the kitchen wall. Luis had left a stack of cribbing beside the porch before work. Tessa's tarp glowed blue against the roof. The house seemed to be surviving through other people's objects. Claire climbed into the opening beside Calvin and began pulling nails. Over the next week, they corrected 1 damaged stud at a time. Calvin taught her to support the load, cut out only what could safely be replaced, and distrust any timber that looked too innocent. Claire worked before dawn when she could, after the bakery, and through every hour of daylight on her days off. The 18th day approached anyway. Wanda cut Claire's schedule after she dropped a tray of hot sugar glaze. It splashed across the floor, missing her shoes by inches. The metal pan struck the tile hard enough to bring 2 stalkers running. Wanda turned off the burner. "Office," she said. Claire followed her with glaze cooling on her apron. Inside, Wanda closed the door. The desk between them was covered in vendor forms and a half-eaten muffin. "I can't let you near an oven like this." I slipped. You fell asleep standing beside the proofer. I closed my eyes. "For how long?" Claire said nothing. Wanda rubbed both temples. I'm taking you off openings and cutting you to 24 hours until you can show me you're safe. I need the hours. I need you not burned. I can do the job. You can. You are not doing it now. Claire pressed her palms against her knees beneath the desk. If you cut my hours, I can't pay for the repairs. If you keep these hours, you may not have a hand to repair with. Wanda's voice broke slightly on the last word. She looked angry about it. Claire untied the stained apron and laid it on the desk. Am I fired? No. Feels like it. Most limits do when you meet them going fast. Claire left through the loading dock without buying the day-old rolls. At the farmhouse, Calvin had uncovered another rotten section beneath the kitchen window. The timber crumbled when Claire touched it. He read her face. What happened? Nothing? Nothing has a smell? What? You smell like burnt sugar. Claire sat on an overturned bucket. Wanda cut my hours. Calvin put down the pry bar. I can't cover the electrician, Claire said, even if we get the wall done. He looked toward the braces. We can ask around. I have asked around. You asked me and Luis, and Marlene bought a hat for $100. She likes the hat. She looks ridiculous. Always did. Claire laughed, but it hurt behind her eyes. Calvin lowered himself onto a stack of boards. Ruth used to keep a list. A list of what? Who needed what? Who had what? Trailer, freezer space, extra hands, a ride to Springfield. She'd call 3 people and make it seem like each one was doing her a favor. That sounds manipulative. It was. And you miss it. Calvin ran one thumb over the worn handle of the pry bar. Sometimes being useful is how people know they belong. Claire looked at the wall they had opened. Fresh pale timber stood beside black rot. Nothing matched, but the load had begun to transfer. Could we finish if the electrical were handled? She asked. Maybe. Maybe isn't enough. It's what the house has. Dean's offer still lay unopened in the glove compartment. Claire took it out after Calvin left. $5,000, with Dean paying closing costs and assuming all responsibility for demolition. The offer expired the day before the correction deadline. Claire would walk away with enough to repay Luis, repay Denise despite her refusal, and place a deposit on a room of her own. She called Dean from the porch. I'll do it, she said. He did not sound pleased. That almost made it worse. Are you sure? No. A long silence passed. I'll have Pike prepare the papers, he said. We can sign Tuesday. Fine. Claire. What? You tried. She ended the call. The following days became a dismantling rather than a repair. Claire returned borrowed tools, packed Ruth's recipe cards, carried the photograph, and crushed Straw Hat's empty place in her mind. She left the salvage roof where it was. Dean could tear it down with the house. On Monday evening, she went into the pantry with a flat pry bar. The height marks belonged to the wall, but Claire could not leave them. She scored the paint along both sides of the narrow board and worked the pry bar behind it carefully. The first nail squealed as it pulled loose. Headlights swept across the kitchen. A truck door slammed. Claire kept working until footsteps crossed the braced porch. Tessa appeared in the pantry doorway, breathing hard as if she had run from the road. What are you doing? Taking this? Tessa looked at the loosened board, then at the packed boxes. Dean says you're selling. Dean talks. He came to ask if he could use my drive for demolition equipment. Claire drove the pry bar deeper. Charge him. Tessa caught the board before it split. Don't. It's mine. I know. Then let go. Tessa kept one hand against Ruth's handwriting. Your mother came back here, she said. Claire stopped pulling. When? Tessa's face had gone pale beneath the sun-browned skin. Before she died, she said. She came back and asked Ruth if the 2 of you could come home. Claire's hand remained around the pry bar. What do you mean, came back? Tessa moved her hand from the board, but the wood stayed between them like a third person. It was 7 years ago. Early March. You were already living with that woman in town. Denise. I didn't know her name then. Mom told me she was going to a recovery meeting in Springfield. She came here instead. Claire set down the pry bar. Alone? Yes. Was she sober? 43 days. She told us the number 3 times. Us. Claire heard it. You were here. Tessa looked toward the dark kitchen. I'd brought Ruth some jars. Elaine was sitting at the table when I arrived. The table Mallory won't give me. Yes. Claire waited until Tessa met her eyes again. What did Mom ask for? A room. Not forever, she said. A few months. She had a job promised at the nursing home in town and wanted you somewhere stable while she got back on her feet. I was 20. I know. You said it like she was bringing home a child. That is how Ruth heard it. Elaine said you were living on somebody's couch because of her. Ruth said you were living there because you had finally stopped following Elaine into fires. The pantry seemed to shrink. Claire put one hand against the counter. What did you say? Nothing useful. What did you say? Tessa's mouth tightened. I told Ruth that 43 days wasn't long enough to trust. Claire looked away. I was scared, Tessa continued. The last time Elaine stayed with me, she took my truck while I was asleep. I found it outside a bar in Arkansas with the passenger window broken. I thought if Ruth made it easy for her to come home, she'd start over with all of us. So Grandma said no. She said Elaine could return after 90 days sober, with a treatment plan and money saved. She said you could come any time, but Elaine couldn't. Claire laughed once. The sound came out hollow. She invited me to leave my mother outside. That's how Elaine heard it too. And you? I told myself Ruth was setting a healthy boundary. The careful phrase sounded ugly in Tessa's voice. What happened? Elaine asked for coffee. Ruth made it. They sat across from each other and didn't drink. Then Elaine left. Did you drive her? To the bus station. She didn't have a car? She'd sold it. Claire thought of the phone call Elaine made that evening. She had sounded bright, almost giddy, said the meeting had gone great, said she might have a surprise soon. 2 days later, she vanished from Denise's house with $40 from Claire's wallet. When she returned, the 43 days were gone. Why didn't she tell me? Claire asked. She said she would when she had something better to report. And you let her? Yes. Did Grandma ever try to find her? She called. Elaine stopped answering. That's not trying very hard. No. Tessa did not protect Ruth. She did not protect herself. Claire had wanted resistance, something solid enough to strike. Mom died 11 months later, Claire said. I know. You came to the funeral. Yes. You looked at me and walked away. Tessa's eyes filled. Yes. Stop saying yes like it makes you honest. It is the only honest answer I have. Claire snatched the pry bar from the floor and shoved it behind the pantry board. The wood lifted with a dry squeal. Tessa did not stop her this time. Ruth regretted it, she said. Good. She regretted it every day. Then she had 11 months to do something. Yes. After Mom died, she had years to speak to me. Yes. Claire pulled harder. One nail tore free, taking a chip of plaster with it. She told me once that she had closed the door because she believed Elaine would knock again, Tessa said. Then the knocking stopped, and Ruth couldn't admit she had been waiting on the wrong side. Claire turned on her. So she left me a house with a door that barely opens? I think she left you the place where she failed. That is not a gift. No, it's not an apology. No, it is a rotting building I have bled on, slept outside, and nearly lost my job for. I know. You don't know. Tessa's face crumpled, but she stayed where she was. Claire pointed toward the bowed kitchen wall. She had years to fix this. She had money. She had Dean. She had all of you. Then she gave it to the one person who couldn't afford to say no without wondering what it meant. Yes, Tessa said. A ruined house is a cruel apology. Yes. Claire wanted to throw the pry bar. Instead, she placed it carefully on the counter because Luis had lent it to her. Tessa wiped her face with the heel of her hand. Don't sign tomorrow. I can't keep it because Grandma felt bad. I'm not asking you to keep the house. What are you asking? Tessa looked around the ruined kitchen. Stay. The word landed softly. Claire shook her head. You ignored me for 7 years. I know. You do not get to confess at midnight and call it belonging. I know that too. Then go home. Tessa stood for another moment, one hand resting on the pantry doorway. Don't split the board. Work it from the bottom. Ruth used square nails when she repaired that trim. Claire picked up the tool. Go. Tessa left. Claire worked the board loose without splitting it. She laid it across the packed boxes and slept at Denise's house for 3 hours. At 8:30, she dressed for the signing in the same good blouse she had worn to the estate meeting. Denise watched from the kitchen doorway. You sure? No. Want me to come? No. Want me to ask again? Claire looked at her. Denise lifted both hands. All right. The farmhouse was on the way to Mr. Pike's office if Claire took the county road. She told herself she needed to collect the deed folder. She told herself she would be there 5 minutes. Cars lined both sides of the lane. Claire slowed. Luis's tow truck stood near the walnut tree. Calvin's truck occupied the front drive. Marlene's sedan was parked in the grass, and Tessa's dark green truck sat beyond it. Earl Cooper had brought his flatbed trailer. 2 adults Claire recognized only by sight from neighboring properties stood near the porch holding shovels. Calvin had removed the failing section beneath the kitchen window. Fresh beams and several lengths of rough-sawn timber lay on sawhorses. Claire got out of the Honda. "What is this?" Marlene approached carrying Ruth's straw hat. "You left before breakfast. I have somewhere to be. We know." Tessa remained beside her truck, giving Claire room to direct the anger where it belonged. Luis held up a yellow envelope. "I talked to the electrician. I can't pay him. He maintains 3 service vans. 2 need brakes, 1 needs a transmission diagnosis. I cover his material deposit, he handles the safety work today, and you paint my office 1 Saturday a month until we're even. That could take a year. The office is very ugly. I didn't agree to that. No, I'm offering." Calvin tapped the rough timber. Earl had these stacked in his equipment shed. Earl shrugged. Was saving them for something important. Got tired of waiting. Marlene took Claire by the wrist and pressed a house key into her palm. Not Denise's key. This one had a strip of red nail polish across the top. "My spare room," Marlene said. "Proper bed. Calvin is forbidden to enter before coffee." "I do not enter her house now," Calvin said. "You did on Thursday. Smoke alarm. I was cooking." "That's why." Claire looked from one person to another. "I can't owe everybody." Tessa came forward with a small cash box. "The farm stand sold the jam and preserves yesterday. Your 6 jars went first. They weren't mine to sell. You did the work. There's enough for the inspection fee and fasteners." I said I was done. "I heard you. Then why are you doing this?" No one answered immediately. One of the neighbors with the shovel cleared his throat and looked away. Earl studied his sling, though he no longer wore it. Luis broke the silence. "I still have 2 walls in the office." Claire did not smile. Calvin leaned both hands on his cane. "House might fail." "Calvin," Marlene warned, "it might. We could do all this, and Voss could decide it isn't enough. Then this is pointless." "No." He looked at her with his pale, aggravated eyes. "House can fail without you disappearing." Marlene placed the straw hat on her own head. "Stay with me. Stay in town. Sell the place later if that's what you choose. Just don't confuse losing a structure with having to leave everybody standing beside it." Claire turned toward Tessa. "You arranged this. I called Marlene." "Who called everybody?" Marlene said. "I made 4 calls. 7, Calvin corrected. Some people require reminders." Tessa looked at Claire. "When you came here, Calvin started leaving his property again. Luis began closing the garage before dark. Marlene found a new reason to tell people what they're doing wrong." "I had plenty of reasons," Marlene said. "We started crossing the road," Tessa continued. "Ruth used to make that happen. Then she stopped." "You did it without trying. That isn't worth $1,400 in electrical work." "No," Luis said. "That part is worth brake pads and paint." Claire looked at the farmhouse. The blue tarp stretched over the front roof. Rusted metal covered the rear. The porch posts still did not match. The open kitchen wall exposed pale repairs beside blackened wood. Nothing about it looked saved. Her phone rang. "Dean." The yard went quiet as she answered. "You coming?" he asked. Claire looked at the pantry board lying across the back seat of her Honda. "No." A pause. "Pike has the papers ready." "I know." "You said you'd do it." "I know." Dean's voice hardened. "Did Calvin talk you out of it?" "No." "Marlene?" "No." "Tessa?" Claire looked at Tessa, who did not look away. "They asked me to stay. I asked you to stay out of a demolition order. You asked me to sell, because that is the sane thing." "It might be." "Then what are you doing?" Claire looked at the fresh timber, the shovels, the electrician's yellow envelope in Luis's hand. Something else. Dean breathed into the phone. "If you miss the deadline, my offer is gone. I understand. And the track stays locked. I understand that too." She ended the call. No one cheered. Claire was grateful. She could not have survived cheering. Instead, Calvin handed her a pencil and pointed to the new sill timber. "Mark 43 3/8." Claire took the pencil. "From which end?" Calvin's mouth moved almost into a smile. Now you're learning. They worked until dark. The electrician disconnected the damaged circuits, removed exposed wiring, and signed the correction form. Luis and Earl lifted the new sill into place, while Claire and Calvin fitted the replacement studs. Marlene fed everyone from the porch. Tessa cleaned storm-soaked plaster from Elaine's room after Calvin declared one narrow path upstairs safe. Mr. Voss arrived the following morning. He inspected the temporary roof covering, the electrical form, and the repaired wall. He measured movement at the kitchen window twice. Claire stood in the yard, with mud on her blouse from the day before. Everyone else had gone back to work. This part belonged to her. Mr. Voss made one final note. The demolition process will not begin, he said. The original stabilization schedule remains in effect. Claire closed her eyes. That is not an occupancy approval, he added. I know. The porch is still unsafe, I know. And the electrical service remains disconnected. Mr. Voss. He looked up. Can I have 5 seconds? He checked his watch. Claire laughed, bent forward, and pressed both hands against her knees. For 5 seconds, the house stood behind her without asking for anything. Mr. Voss gave her 7 seconds before clearing his throat. Claire straightened. Thank you. I didn't do you a favor. I know. He tucked the clipboard beneath one arm. Call when the porch framing, roof envelope, and structural repairs are complete. Do not call because you're optimistic. Has that happened before? Constantly. He stepped toward his truck, then looked back at the farmhouse. The rear wall is good work, he said. By the time Claire understood it as praise, he was driving away. Marlene's spare room had a brass bed, flowered curtains, and 14 decorative pillows Claire was required to remove each night and replace each morning. Why? She asked after the 3rd day. Because that is where they live. You don't see them during the day. I know where they are. Calvin came through the back door before coffee only once. The smoke alarm was sounding because Marlene had dropped a biscuit onto the oven burner. This is not entry, he shouted from the hallway. This is rescue. It's one biscuit. Smoke has no respect for quantity. Claire stood in the kitchen fanning the alarm with a dish towel. You two should live together. They answered no at the same time. Sleeping in a real bed made Claire feel worse before it made her feel better. Every muscle she had ignored announced itself. She slept through her alarm on the first morning, but Marlene knocked at 4 and drove her to Harlan's in silence. Wanda met Claire at the bakery door. You look human, she said. Good morning to you too. It was a compliment. Wanda kept her on reduced hours for 2 weeks. Claire hated the lost money and needed every hour of rest. When Wanda restored one opening shift, she did it without ceremony, adding Claire's name to the schedule in blue ink. Do I get a speech? Claire asked. You want one? No? Then stop fishing. Claire took the shift. The house improved in pieces small enough to be discouraging. Calvin and Claire finished the rear sill, then replaced the porch beam using the mismatched cedar posts. Luis brought the electrician's van back to the garage with new brakes and sent the electrician back to the farmhouse with wiring. Claire painted Luis's office one Saturday each month, repaired the garage awning, and recovered the torn vinyl chair with a remnant he found in storage. You made it respectable, Luis said, sitting carefully. It still has gray sides and a brown seat. So do I. He paid for the next spool of electrical wire without discussing it. Marlene's red-marked key stayed on Claire's ring. So did Denise's. Claire returned to Denise's house twice a week for dinner, sometimes bringing laundry, sometimes not. Denise reclaimed the bathroom drawer and labeled it mine with a sticky note. Claire labeled the other one temporary. Denise crossed out the word and wrote Claire. Neither of them mentioned it. Tessa came most often on evenings when Claire worked upstairs. She stripped ruined wallpaper from Elaine's room in long, damp sections, saying little. The broken window was boarded, the ceiling opened enough to dry, but Claire did not have money to finish it. One evening, Tessa found her sitting in the doorway. You can close it, she said. Claire glanced at the bare studs. It doesn't have a door that closes anymore. I mean, leave it unfinished. I know. Tessa leaned against the hall wall. Ruth kept this room exactly as Elaine left it for years. Then one morning, she stripped the bed, packed the clothes, and gave the dresser to a church sale. When? After the bus station. Claire ran her thumb over a dried line of plaster on her jeans. Did she cry? No. Of course not. She burned the biscuits that afternoon. Claire looked at her. For Ruth, that was a collapse. It was such an inadequate measure of sorrow that Claire believed it. "I still don't forgive you," she said. "I know. You're allowed to say something else sometimes." Tessa considered. "The front bedroom gets better afternoon light." Claire laughed, and they went downstairs. As the repair work became less urgent, it also became more social. People stopped by without disasters to justify the drive. Earl brought a box of hinges because he had too many hinges and not enough doors. One of the adults who had helped with the rear wall needed a trailer, so Claire called Luis, who borrowed Earl's. Marlene needed freezer space for tomatoes, and Tessa had room after selling the last peaches. Calvin needed someone to collect a load of cedar before rain. Claire found 3 people and a truck before he finished insisting he had not asked. Requests began reaching her indirectly. "Tell Claire I have extra canning jars." Ask Claire who borrowed the long ladder. "Claire, does Luis still have that pressure washer?" The front room acquired folding chairs because people kept sitting on buckets. The porch acquired a coffee tin full of screws, a cooler that belonged to no one, and 3 pairs of work gloves no one claimed. It irritated Dean more than the construction had. He stopped his tractor one afternoon as 4 adults crossed the edge of his equipment track, carrying lumber. The chain had been unhooked and laid beside the post. "Who opened that?" No one answered. Claire came around the house, holding the other end of a sawhorse. "I did." "You don't have a key." "I lifted it over the post." Dean looked at the chain. "That isn't what the track is for. We needed to bring porch boards around the side. You have a drive. The trailer can't turn beside the walnut." "That isn't my problem." The others set down the lumber and became interested in their gloves. Claire planted the sawhorse. "Then lock it again after we finish." Dean got off the tractor. "You think, because everybody's bringing you scraps, this land has gone back to being Mom's community center?" "No, that's how she treated it. People drove anywhere they wanted, left gates open, borrowed equipment. Then when something broke, I fixed it. You could tell them no. I am telling you no." Claire looked at the people standing behind her. "All right, take the lumber back around the road." They obeyed without complaint. That seemed to anger Dean more. He waited until they were out of hearing. "You like making me look unreasonable. You came with a tractor to defend 30 feet of dirt. I'm running a farm, and I moved the lumber. That isn't the point." "No. The point is you think I inherited everybody taking your mother's side." Dean's face reddened. "You weren't here when she needed anything." The old blow still found its place. Claire gripped the sawhorse. "You're right." He blinked. "I wasn't here," she said. "You moved her out of the old house. You drove her. You took care of the fields. She blamed you for needing it. That was unfair." Dean looked toward the farmhouse, where the new porch beam stood level on mismatched posts. Claire continued, "But you don't get to punish me because she left me the place where she felt guilty. You think that's what this is?" "Yes." He laughed bitterly. "She gave me the land because I'd already spent my life on it. She gave Mallory everything that could sit still and look pretty. She gave you the only thing anybody remembers." Claire had no answer ready. Dean's voice lowered. "I got the good house, right? That's what you said." "You did. I got the house she died in. You got the one she talked about." The distinction passed through Claire slowly. "Did she know you hated it?" she asked. "I don't hate the old place. You tried to buy it for $500. I wanted it gone before it turned into exactly this." He gestured toward the folding chairs, the stacked lumber, the people carrying boards along the road. "People?" Claire asked. "Another thing I have to be outside of. You put up the chain, because every time I leave something open, someone treats it like permission." Claire looked at him. "Maybe sometimes it is." Dean shook his head and climbed back onto the tractor. The track remained locked for 6 more days. On the 7th, Claire arrived to find the chain looped loosely around one post. No padlock, no note. She used the track to deliver the porch boards and fasten the chain behind her. When Dean passed later, neither of them waved. The porch was finished 2 days before the original stabilization deadline. It was not elegant. The floorboards came from 3 different sources and ranged from honey-colored pine to gray oak. The cedar posts looked like cousins rather than twins. Calvin rejected Claire's first stair stringer, then her second. "What's wrong with this one? Rises uneven, by 1/8 of an inch. Ankle doesn't care about fractions. You ever consider letting the house keep one flaw?" Calvin looked at the roof. "One accessible flaw," Claire amended. He handed back the square. She cut the stringer again. Mr. Voss inspected the completed structural work, the dried-in roof, and the repaired porch. He approved the stabilization phase and authorized the next stage toward occupancy, provided Claire completed plumbing, safe electrical service, smoke alarms, and interior hazards. "How long?" she asked. "That depends on your money. Everybody says that. Money is repetitive." He attached a new notice beside the red condemnation paper. The new one did not remove the old warning, but it allowed repair work to continue without a demolition schedule. Claire stood on the porch after he left and touched the edge of the notice. The house was not safe to live in. The kitchen had no working sink. Most outlets were dead. Upstairs still smelled faintly of rain. But for the first time, the county was waiting for her to finish, instead of waiting for her to fail. Calvin came through the door carrying the rejected stair stringer. "You keeping this?" "For firewood." "Good wood. It's wrong by 1/8 of an inch." "Still wood." Claire leaned against the cedar post. "You know, when normal people are proud, they say so." "Wouldn't know." He put the stringer beneath the porch and left. The work slowed through autumn. Claire paid for pipe insections and learned to sweat copper badly before Luis convinced her to use fittings that did not require fire. Tessa traded orchard preserves for a used kitchen sink. Denise found 2 intact light fixtures at an estate sale and made Claire pay $5 for both because free makes you twitchy. The first room Claire finished was the front bedroom, the one with better afternoon light. She did not move into it. Marlene still had 3 decorative pillows Claire had not learned to arrange correctly, and leaving before the plumbing worked would have offended everyone with sense. The dining room remained empty except for folding chairs. Claire stopped asking about Ruth's table. On a cold Saturday morning, an unfamiliar pickup backed down the drive. The tailgate lowered, revealing 4 turned wooden legs and a broad scarred tabletop tied beneath a blanket. Mallory climbed out wearing jeans, work boots, and no pearls. She stood beside the truck with both hands in her coat pockets. "I brought something," she said. Claire came down the porch steps. "I can see that." Mallory looked toward the house, then at the table. "Dad said I was being dramatic." "Were you?" "Probably." "Why now?" Mallory pulled one hand from her pocket and ran it across the blanket. "I went to look at dining rooms." Claire waited. "I kept measuring them for this table. I'd walk into houses I didn't even like and picture it sitting there, with Grandma's bowls and the silver and everything looking exactly right. That sounds like you." "I know." Mallory gave a small, embarrassed laugh. Then I realized I wasn't picturing anybody at it. Claire looked through the front window at the folding chairs and sighed. "Are you giving it to me?" "I'm returning it to the room where it fits." "That is not the same sentence." "No." Mallory met her eyes. "I'm giving it to you." Claire touched the worn edge beneath the blanket. "I'm not carrying it alone. I didn't expect you to. You kinda did last time." Mallory absorbed that without defense. They untied the ropes and lifted opposite ends. The table was heavier than memory. Halfway to the porch, Mallory's boot sank into mud. "Don't drop it," Claire said. "I am trying not to lose a shoe. Priorities. It's a good boot. So is the table." Mallory pulled free with a wet sucking sound and nearly fell. Claire laughed. Mallory began laughing too, breathless and annoyed, and for several seconds they stood in the yard, holding Ruth's table between them, like 2 people who had finally found something they could not carry without each other. At the dining room doorway, Mallory stopped. "Do I get to come back?" she asked. Claire shifted the weight against her hip. "If you want a place here, you participate." "What does that mean?" "It means you don't bring pearls to a work day." Mallory nodded toward her boots. "These acceptable? They're muddy. Because of you. Then they're perfect." Together, they carried the table into the house. The table refused to sit level. Mallory pressed one palm against the top. It rocked toward Claire with a soft wooden knock. "You said this was the room where it fit," Claire said. "I didn't say the floor cooperated. They tried turning it. They tried moving it nearer the window." Mallory crouched to inspect the legs while Claire placed a folded recipe card beneath one foot. "Not that," Mallory said. "It's for turnip casserole. Grandma liked that. No one liked that. They respected it." Mallory laughed and replaced the card with a thin scrap from the rejected stair stringer. The table settled. "There," she said. 4 pale grooves marked the tabletop, where Ruth's dishes had sat for years. One corner bore a dark crescent Claire remembered tracing with her finger. The empty dining room changed around it. The folding chairs stopped looking abandoned and began looking insufficient. Mallory removed her coat. "What are we doing today?" Claire had not expected her to mean it. Kitchen cabinets need scrubbing. With what? Bleach water. Gloves are under the sink that doesn't work. Mallory looked toward the kitchen. You have a gift for hospitality. She stayed until dark. She complained about the smell, broke one cabinet hinge, and removed mouse debris with the grim concentration of someone dismantling a bomb. When Claire came in carrying lumber, Mallory stood at the sink wiping her eyes. Bleach? Claire asked. Obviously. Claire set down the boards. Mallory scrubbed harder. I didn't know Grandma asked Mom to give you the table. What? Dad told me. After I brought it. When did she ask? Before she died. She said, if you ever took the house, the table should stay. Dad told her the contents were already written to me, and she said you'd work it out. Claire leaned against the doorway. That sounds like her. I thought if I kept everything, I'd know what she saw in me. You were her granddaughter, so were you. That didn't make any of us easy. Mallory looked around the damaged kitchen. No. She rinsed the rag in a bucket and went back to work. The plumbing took another month. The well pump needed a new pressure switch. The kitchen drain had to be replaced, and every faucet released brown water before running clear. Claire stood beside the sink the first time it worked, turning the handle off and on until Marlene reached past her. Water is not improved by repetition. I'm checking. You've checked 12 times. 13. Marlene filled the kettle. The electrical service returned room by room. Claire paid every Friday, sometimes $30, sometimes $80. Luis tracked her labor on a grease-stained sheet taped inside his office cabinet. You owe me 11 Saturdays, he said. I painted every wall. The trim is emotionally unfinished. You invented that. I've been around Marlene. Claire sewed new canvas over the garage awning instead. Calvin inspected the farmhouse stairs, windows, railings, smoke alarms, and every board Claire hoped he would overlook. He never praised work he could criticize. When he found nothing wrong with the new porch steps, he climbed them 3 times and complained that the handrail was cold. Tessa helped finish the front bedroom. They painted it a warm white that turned gold in afternoon light. Elaine's room remained stripped to its studs with a closed door hung back on its hinges. Claire no longer felt the need to finish it first. Mr. Voss's final inspection began at 8 on a clear December morning. Claire waited on the porch, wearing Ruth's crushed straw hat over a wool cap. Marlene had returned it for luck. It is not a lucky hat, she had warned. You paid $105 for it. I paid for lumber while protecting your pride. The hat was paperwork. Mr. Voss checked the foundation repairs, tested the porch rail, and stood beneath the mismatched roof for a long time. Inside, he opened the electrical panel, ran every faucet, pressed the smoke alarm buttons, and measured the stair rail. Claire followed quietly. When he reached the dining room, he placed one hand on Ruth's table. It did not rock. Interior finishes remain incomplete upstairs, he said. Yes. Rear bedroom is closed and not approved for occupancy. Yes. Kitchen wall shows no further movement. Claire did not answer. Agreement felt dangerous. Mr. Voss returned to the front door. The red condemnation paper hung beneath months of dust and fingerprints. He removed the staples one by one. Claire watched him fold the notice. Front bedroom, kitchen, dining room, front room, and bathroom are approved for occupancy, he said. You'll need another inspection before using the remaining upstairs rooms. I can live here? That is what occupancy means. People use words strangely around this house. He handed her the folded red notice. Don't make me put it back. Claire held it against her chest. Mr. Voss walked to his truck, paused, and faced the porch. You did good work, he said. This time, she heard it before he drove away. She moved in that evening with 3 boxes of clothes, Denise's spare lamp, and the jar of cloudy buttons she had found in Ruth's closet. Her mattress lay on the front bedroom floor because the brass bed belonged to Marlene, and the 14 decorative pillows had declined relocation. Denise carried in the last box. You own furniture? She asked. Folding chairs? You own a table. Mallory owns the chairs that match it. Of course she does. She's bringing 2. Out of how many? 8. Denise set the box beside the mattress. Progress. Marlene filled the kitchen cabinets with donated pots before Claire could object. Tessa put jars of peaches and jam in the pantry. Luis installed a hook by the back door and hung the repaired awning needle there for no logical reason. Calvin arrived after everyone left and placed a spare key on the mantel. What's that? My workshop. You're giving me a key to your property? No, I'm storing it somewhere you can find it. Why would I need it? Can't predict incompetence. He left before Claire could thank him. The farmhouse never became quiet again. Some evenings, no one visited, and Claire sat at Ruth's table eating soup while the radiator clicked. Those evenings mattered too. Silence felt different when it was chosen. Other nights, someone knocked needing a ladder, freezer space, a ride, or the name of the electrician who accepted break work as partial payment. Claire kept no written list. People left messages. She remembered most and called Marlene about the rest. The kitchen hosted its first batch of peach preserves before the upstairs plaster was finished. Tessa brought fruit. Marlene brought sugar. Mallory arrived with Ruth's wide copper pot and wore an old sweatshirt. "You own an old sweatshirt?" Claire asked. "I bought it. For this?" "It was $7. You spent $7 to look poor?" Mallory threw a dish towel at her. They laughed until Tessa asked whether either of them planned to keep the syrup from burning. Dean did not come. He watched the traffic from the ranch house. His hay acreage remained orderly and profitable. He replaced the private farm access sign after wind bent it, then left the chain unlatched more often than locked. Neighbors stopped asking him about leases at the farmhouse table. They asked Claire about borrowing equipment Dean owned, and Claire made them call him directly. Sometimes he agreed, sometimes he did not. She refused to become the soft door around his hard one. On the morning they planned the first neighborhood supper, a load of gravel appeared in the farmhouse drive. Dean sat behind the wheel of the dump truck. Claire walked out carrying a coffee mug. "Did you miss the turn? Your drive holds water." "I know. People will rut it tonight." "I know." He looked past her toward the repaired porch. Folding tables stood beneath the roof. Mallory was inside arguing with Marlene about dumpling thickness. "Mallory told you," Claire said. "She tells everybody everything eventually." Dean released the tailgate and spread gravel while Claire directed him away from the walnut roots. When he finished, he parked near the equipment track and climbed down. "How much?" Claire asked. "For gravel?" "Yes." He wiped dust from his hands. "You still have that $5,000 offer?" "The unsigned one. Call it even." She smiled despite herself. "That math explains the farming." He looked at the roof. "Wade says it won't match for 20 years. It doesn't match now." I noticed. Neither mentioned Ruth. Claire nodded toward the porch. "You staying? Am I invited?" "You're here." "That's not the same." "No?" Dean looked toward the house where his mother's table stood beneath mismatched light fixtures. "What do I have to do?" he asked. Claire handed him the coffee mug. "Ice is in Tessa's truck." Dean took the mug. "That's all? You want a harder job?" "No." "Then participate." He brought the ice. By sunset, the porch held more adults than matching chairs. Earl sat near the steps, telling Luis how the tobacco shed had once been straight. Denise brought rotisserie chicken and labeled the container "Everybody." Wanda arrived after closing the bakery with 2 trays of pecan rolls and warned Claire not to critique them. Mallory placed Ruth's dumplings on the table. She had used extra pepper. Tessa stood in the pantry doorway, holding an empty peach jar. "Where do you want these now?" she asked. Claire pointed to the upper shelf. "You know where they go." Tessa placed the jar there without asking again. Dean sat at the far end of Ruth's table. No one gave him the head. No one gave Claire the head either. The table was crowded enough that ownership had no useful seat. After dinner, Mallory reached into her bag and handed Claire a narrow black frame. Inside was a $1 bill. "Pike kept yours clipped in the estate file," she said. "He gave it to me when he closed the accounts." Claire held the frame up to the porch light. The bill was still clean, except for a faint crease where Mr. Pike's clip had pressed it. She mounted it beside the pantry frame, which she had reattached after the wall dried. Ruth's pencil marks ran above and below it, ending with Claire's name and the old accusation about August heat. Someone crossed the porch, and the lowest step squeaked. Calvin looked at Claire. "I heard it," she said. "Loose fastener." "I know." Wanda leaned against the doorway with a pecan roll. Was this place worth $1? Conversation softened around the table. Claire looked at the rusted roof through the window, the patched walls, the jars in the pantry, and the muddy boots lined beside the door. She looked at Mallory washing dishes badly while Marlene corrected her, at Tessa drying Ruth's copper pot, at Dean carrying folding chairs instead of claiming one. Then she picked up the hammer from beneath the pantry shelf. "Not yet," she said, heading for the loose step. "But it will be."